Welcome back to the channel. This is Freddy Stormy. You watching second and final part of What If Naruto and Kushina were sent to Mutant Nation by Minato. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
Rogue flipped through the channels while seated on the couch. She was completely bored. She jumped when Naruto materialized beside her in a cloud of smoke. He waved and smiled, then took a seat beside her. Naruto kicked his feet up and leaned back, asking, "Hey, what you watching?" She kicked her own feet up and pushed his legs away from her. Her feet on his lap didn't bother him. "Nothing, just bored," Rogue said with a shrug. "How is Scott and his brother?" "They're okay, couple days rest and be back to normal," Naruto replied. He reclined. Rogue grinned and concurred, saying, "It is good to have things back to normal." Naruto exclaimed, "This is the best birthday present ever." With a beaming smile, a brand new Kawasaki Ninja 210 motorcycle caught his attention. Naruto's two favorite colors, orange and black, are used to paint it. Kushina grinned. "I thought you might like this. Hopefully, you'll stop stealing the van now that you have your own ride." Naruto got on the bicycle. He was tossed the keys by Kushina. He put them in the ignition. After catching them, the engine came to life. With a roar, Naruto's face broke into a smile. She covered his head with an orange helmet. He sped forward. After sliding the black visor down, she watched him and let out a laugh. Kushina was aware that he wouldn't return for a while. She might go check if Charles had returned with any new recruits recently. Cerebro has been identifying a lot of new mutants. Bavel Naruto loved his new vehicle and sped down the road. He sighed as he glanced at the dense traffic ahead. His fun is being ruined by stupid traffic. He turned to look in his rearview mirror after hearing a honking from behind. His eyes lit up with surprise, and he swerved to the side as a brown car sped by where he had been. The air was filled with sirens as the brown car was pursued by multiple police vehicles before crashing into the bridge's side. The brown car carelessly collided with multiple other vehicles. A school bus carrying kids was struck by debris that fell from the bridge. The brown car started to sway from side to side. Without pausing, Naruto created 3 hand seals in a split second and lifted his helmet. His belly grew larger. He held up his arm. Sweden. Tepodama, water release. Gunshot, a basketball-sized ball of water and a punch to the stomach erupted at high speed. It appeared that a horrible catastrophe would happen when the brown car started to fall directly onto the school bus, but a ball of water hit the vehicle in the side, causing it to veer off course. The bus was unharmed when the brown car struck the ground, and Naruto lowered his helmet. The brown car was completely dented in the side. "I have to leave," Naruto said as he drove stealthily to a side street. "Take a break," Logan observed as the new pupils attempted to use their abilities to blow each other up. He scowled. It will be difficult for the man to teach a new group of children. There are a total of 9 new mutants, each possessing unique abilities. Logan grimaced and said, "We are going to need more instructors." Xavier, the professor, laughed. "Yes, I have no doubt they'll be a handful." Kushina walked into the room and asked, "Is Wolverine afraid of a bunch of kids?" She appeared across from Professor Xavier. Logan shot her a grumpy glance. Kushina grinned and said, "It'll be fun. Things have been way too quiet over the summer." Aurora entered the space. She held up a remote control and switched on the TV, saying, "I have something you all might want to see. There's an emergency news report." No more than 20 minutes ago, a cop chase had occurred where the police were chasing down Arnold Brown. Brown gave the cops quite the chase before crashing into the side of the bridge. It seemed like a terrible tragedy would occur as Brown's hung dangled above a school bus full of children. That is, until a strange miracle happened. This is footage of what happened. Professor Xavier, Logan, and Kushina saw as Brown's car was knocked off the collision course with the bus after a ball of water struck it in the side. As you can see, out of nowhere a ball of highly concentrated water struck Brown's car, saving the lives of the children in the bus. No one knows where it came from and investigators are baffled. The news was switched off by Professor Xavier. Kushina remarked, "What? He did the right thing." "I know, but he needs to be more careful. Now isn't the time for the world to publicly learn of mutants," replied Xavier. "Naruto knows that no one spotted him. I trained him to be very discreet. How do you think he gets away with all those pranks?" Kushina laughed. "Don't worry, he knows the importance of hiding our abilities." Bavel High Rogue sat looking bored. She detested these public gatherings. An idiotic speech will be delivered by the new principal. She didn't like this any more than classes, not because she had better things to do. "Excuse me, but are you too aware of the duration of these auditoriums?" When Rogue looked up, she saw a cute girl standing at her own height, wearing a black shirt and a dark green skirt that hung down to her knees. The girl had black hair with purple highlights, which looked surprisingly good on her. She spoke with a British accent. "Not too long, but they do get us out of class," Rogue replied. "Well, you can't complain about that," the girl said with a smile. "I'm Christy, and I just started school. She recently moved across the pond with my family." Rogue, Christy sat down beside Rogue, and the two girls started conversing. Kurt and Naruto sat up next to each other, and Scott shook his head at them after observing the innocent expression in their eyes. Scott let out a groan. As Principal Kelly entered the auditorium, he approached the podium, grabbed the microphone to adjust it, and as he coughed while covered in chalk, the students erupted in laughter, and Naruto and Kurt bumped fists. The first of many pranks that would follow the microphone exploded in a cloud of white smoke. "Take a break. Hey Kitty." Lance grinned. Kitty frowned. "Leave me alone. Lance, I prefer not to speak with you." Kitty winced in agony as Lance's eyes grew irate and he reached out to grab her wrist. "Come on, Kitty," he said. "Stop acting that way," Lance said. "Let go of me," she said, phasing through his grasp. When an arm blocked Lance's attempt to stop her, Naruto moved in front of him and gave him a stern look. "Are you okay, Kitty-chan?" He utterly disregarded Lance. "Move it, pretty boy," scowled Lance as he shoved Naruto. "I'm all right, Naruto. Let's just leave," Kitty said, giving Lance a fierce look. Lance grinned. "Yeah, why don't you leave before you get hurt?" And Blob and Quicksilver approached him from behind, grinning the same. "Hey, is something wrong?" Scott said. "Yeah, you and the X-Men are my problem," Lance said with a virile expression. Scott reached for his shades and said, "Want to take action?" "Go ahead, blast me," said Lance with a sly smile. "Are you afraid to use your powers in public like I am?" Scott scowled before leaving with Naruto and Kitty after Kitty grabbed him and said, "Don't, Scott, you know the rules." "Hey guys, I think it is time we show this school who we really are," laughed Lance. "I say tonight we introduce everyone to the Brotherhood." "Soccer championship match," Kurt exclaimed. "Wow, Jean looks fantastic out there today." Scott said, "Yeah," without even listening to Kurt's words. "Go, Bavel." Kitty yelled when Bavel scored a second goal. The school erupted in cheers. However, the game was cut short when a new voice, one that all of the X-Men recognized, came over the speaker. "Hello everybody, we have made the decision to come out of hiding and show you who we really are and what we can really do," Lance said. "You see, we are mutants, or freaks, if you will. Furthermore, we are not alone. Jean Grey, Scott Summers, and every other employee at the Xavier Institute are also mutants. My buddies and I would like to make this game a bit more interesting," Lance said with a sly smile as the students began to stare at Scott and Jean as Lance raised his hand. A strong earthquake split the soccer field, sending the girls running in terror. Quicksilver laughed and ran towards Principal Kelly, circling him so quickly that the principal was lifted into the air. Jean swiftly used her powers to catch Principal Kelly and gently lower him to the ground. Up the bleachers, Blob began to come to life. Naruto leapt forward and placed a seal directly on Blob's forehead, saying, "Some people never learn." Blob screamed in agony as lightning struck his body. "Stay still," Toad said, attempting to strike Nightcrawler, but Nightcrawler teleported away, sending Toad crashing into the bleachers. A red beam pierced the air, striking Quicksilver, who fell to the ground unconscious. "Time to finish this." Avalanche grinned. Naruto appeared behind Lance and slammed his elbow into the back of Avalanche's head, causing him to fall to the ground like a bag of potatoes. "Yeah," said Rogue. Avalanche's eyes widened in surprise and then filled with pain as Rogue kicked him across the face. Students looked fearfully at the X-Men after the Brotherhood was vanquished, and Jean's teammates retreated from her with a wounded expression. "Professor, what do we do?" Cyclops inquired. "I will erase this event from everyone's mind." Charles closed his eyes, and Xavier began to do just that. "Oh, I got everyone," Charles said. Collapsing with a weary expression in his eyes, Xavier passed out from exhaustion, and all of the students but the X-Men were unconscious and had no memory of what had just transpired. Naruto declared, "I'll get the Brotherhood out of here." Nightcrawler said, "I'll help," and the two began teleporting the Brotherhood to a secure area, with Jean using her abilities to wake everyone up while the X-Men crept off to change. "Take a break," Logan said. "Take it easy, Charles," as Xavier groaned in awakening. "Did it succeed?" Charles inquired. "Yes, nobody is aware of anything," Scott grinned. "Professor, I must apologize to you. The world isn't prepared to learn about us. You were correct." With a dejected smile, Charles said, "No, but one day they will be." Logan gave him a stern look. It turns out that a strong magnetic interference caused the blackout. Nobody was around to witness what transpired. "Magneto," Charles said thoughtfully. "Room of danger." With blood splattering on his hands from his relentless punching of a metal training post, Naruto delivered a final blow, hanging his head so that his bangs overshadowed his eyes. In the eyes of every single student, including those he considered friends, he had seen fear and hatred the moment they were exposed as mutants. All they saw were freaks, and no more than freaks, They had turned into monsters in the eyes of the rest of the world. It didn't even matter that he and the other X-Men had saved their lives. They received the same looks as the Brotherhood. The knowledge of mutants is not yet ready for the world. Until that time, we must always be careful to conceal our abilities. Naruto sat down on the floor and asked, "When will the world be ready?" High auditorium in Babel. "Hello everybody." A brief hush fell over the auditorium as Principal Kelly approached the podium, grinning warmly and checking that the microphone was functioning. "We're here to celebrate the girls' soccer team winning the state championship." The auditorium was filled with cheers. Voted by her peers, "It is my honor to present Miss Jean Grey with this trophy." Kelly grinned as the auditorium erupted in more applause and whistling. Jean grinned as she approached the podium, accepted the trophy, and said, "Thank you." She turned to her classmates and said, "I would just like to say that." As she clutched her head in agony, voices began to fill Jean's head and her eyes darted from student to student. Is Jean struggling with her powers? Xavier scowled as he saw her trip and drop her trophy. Take a break. They were hiding in the bushes with Bobby and Tabitha, who were laughing until Naruto shushed them. They were watching the institute's front doors when they heard a familiar voice say, "The party is tonight at Duncan's, you should come," and Jean grinned. "I don't know," Scott replied. With a smile, Jean said, "Come on, it'll be fun." As Scott opened his mouth to speak, a series of popping noises startled him and Jean, causing them to stumble toward the ice-frozen steps. All. As they slid toward the fountain and directly into it, the two gasped and moaned as a splashing sound filled the air. They turned to see Naruto, Bobby, and Tabitha clutching their stomachs as their eyes narrowed and a loud laugh filled the air. "Say cheese," Naruto said as he took multiple digital camera pictures. "How immature of you." Jean sighed. "Send that camera to us," Scott shouted. "Go for it," Tabitha shouted. Jean and Scott complained that they would now have to return inside and change, while Bobby laughed and said, "Every man for themselves." Naruto waved before vanishing in a cloud of smoke. Gathering Rogue looked around as Naruto entered the party, waved to her, and then went to meet up with some of her school pals. She saw a lot of the girls approach to say hello to Naruto sluts. "Hey, you okay?" Risty inquired. "Yeah, fine," Rogue lied with a sly grin. Risty turned to face Naruto and said, "I think someone has a crush on Naruto." Rogue's eyes widened. "What? No, I don't," Rogue blushed. "I notice how you look at him. How about you give him a call here? He also likes you." Rogue's expression brightened. "You think so?" Risty grinned and said, "Oh, yes, at lunch. He always hangs out with you." "That has no significance, just the kind of guy who gets along with everyone." As Naruto, Jean also likes him. "She acts as though she doesn't, but I can tell," Rogue said, a little irate. There were times when she truly did despise Jean. Risty grinned and said, "He's coming towards us." "Hey," Naruto said with a smile as he sat down beside Rogue. "Hi." Rogue blushed. According to his smile, "You look really pretty." Rogue's face lit up with a smile that she couldn't control. "Thanks." Naruto laughed and said, "You don't look so bad yourself." "I believe I'm going to go get punched later." "You too," Risty grinned. Nervously, Rogue and Naruto shifted. "So, they both began." Naruto smiled and motioned for Rogue to speak first. "How have you been?" she asked, looking down at her gloved hands for that cliched remark. Rogue wanted to slam her head against the wall. "I am thinking about whether to play a prank on Scott or let him and Duncan fight it out." Rogue turned to face Scott and Duncan, who were playing a fierce game of ping pong in an attempt to win Jean's approval. "Watch this," winked Naruto, raising an eyebrow and paying close attention. Just then, an invisible string tripped Scott and Duncan, causing them to fall, and the ping pong ball settled perfectly on top of the net. Jean turned to face Naruto and Rogue, and Naruto waved as Jean gave him a disapproving look. "You think she would realize by now that those looks mean nothing to me." The two laughed together as Rogue grinned and said, "Guess some people never learn. How about we leave this place? We can go see a late-night movie and play hooky." Naruto smiled. "Let's do it," said Rogue with a smirk. "Better than spending the entire night watching Scott and Duncan quarrel over Jean." Jean's eyes glowed with jealousy as she watched Naruto depart with Rogue. "The Xavier Institute." "Jean, could we talk for a minute?" Xavier said. Jean approached the professor and said, "Yes, tell me what it is." "I have noticed that you seem to be having a bit of trouble controlling your powers lately," said Professor Xavier with a slight smile. "Maybe we ought to hold some private meetings." "I'm doing fine, Professor. I was just thrown off balance by a headache. I have everything under control." Jean grinned. "Are you certain?" Jean smiled appreciatively and said, "Yes, I have to get to school." Kushina emerged from the shadows at Charles's side, a stern expression on her face as Professor Xavier watched Jean go. Jean had been lying. Tryouts for the Bayville High Track as Jean picked up her javelin and prepared to throw it. Voices began to flood her mind, causing her to gasp and clutch her head in agony. The javelin floated into the air and flew in the direction of a group of girls, including Kitty, and Jean fell to her knees. The javelin sailed over the girls and embedded itself in the stands, and Lance, acting swiftly, used his powers to create a slight tremor to knock them down. Kitty looked up at him, and he pointed at the javelin before shrugging. 4 20-pound shot but balls flew into the air and blasted off in all directions as Jean staggered past them. Coach McCoy's eyes widened as 2 of the balls came his way, and he raised his hands and caught one, with each of them displaying incredible strength. Scott lifted his visors and blasted the final one before it crashed into an unwary Duncan. "Sorry," Naruto said as he ran over to Jean, punching her in the stomach. Scott's eyes widened, and Jean fell into Naruto's arm without resistance. He sealed his hand and vanished in a whirl of leaves. Xavier Institute's medical center. A burst of psychic energy escaped from the girl, nearly knocking Professor Xavier away. Naruto pumped more chakra into the seal, making it glow. Jean lay in the center of a large seal, with Kushina and Naruto sitting at opposite sides, their hands in a ram seal. Professor Xavier rolled into the center of the seal, placing a hand on Jean's head and starting to sort through her mind to help her control the rapid growth of her powers. Outside the room, Logan said, "Where is Jean?" Scott rushed down the hallway. "The professor is tending to her in the room," Logan said. "No one is allowed in." Scott clenched his fists, and Logan's claws exploded out. "Don't make this hard, glasses." Scott reluctantly got up and sat down outside the room. After 10 minutes, Naruto came out of the room, dodging a punch that was aimed at his face. Scott then tried to punch him again, but Logan stopped him by stepping between them. "How could you do it?" Scott scowled. "You hit her like it was nothing." "I didn't want to," said Naruto, scowling, "but she was losing control." As his anger increased, Scott said, "You could have found another way." "Indeed, and who can say what harm she might have done by then, or worse, who she might have harmed?" Naruto countered. "If I had allowed her to harm someone with her abilities, Jean would never have forgiven me." "Calm down, Scott," said Professor Xavier as he rolled out of the room. Naruto made the correct decision. Jean's abilities were becoming unmanageable. He prevented her from losing control long enough to get to the Institute by knocking her out. He made the correct decision. Logan looked at the two. Naruto left without a word, and Scott went into the infirmary to visit Jean. "Take a break." Jean opened her eyes slowly, rubbed her head, and recalled the events at school. A guilty expression came to her eyes, and she said, "You should have told me." She turned to see Naruto sitting on the bed beside her, his eyes full of anger. "That was just plain stupid what you did," Naruto said. "I understand, I believed I could manage it by myself," Jean said. "Why?" scowled Naruto. "We're your pals." Jean grinned. "I guess I didn't want to admit that I was losing control." Naruto smiled, "And people call me the stupid one," and Jean laughed. "I appreciate you helping me. You're there for me no matter what. I owe you so much," Jean said, blushing slightly. Naruto chuckled and said, "I'll always be there for you." He leapt from the bed and disappeared in a cloud of smoke. A moment later, the door opened and Scott entered the room, his eyes wide with surprise. He rushed to her side and said, "Jean, are you okay?" "I am fine now," Jean said, wondering why Naruto had left so abruptly. "I owe Naruto for getting me back to the Institute." "He attacked you," Scott said with a frown. "It's unbelievable that he would do such a thing." "He didn't attack me," Jean said, his eyes hardening. "To save the others and get me to safety, Naruto did what he had to, because I wouldn't have told the professor that I was losing control of my abilities. I could have seriously hurt someone." It seemed that Naruto actually knew Jean better than Scott, and he sighed as he had to apologize to his friend. "I would never have forgiven myself if such a thing happened," Scott said, looking down with a guilty expression. "With 2 weeks until Christmas, could they not take a break?" Rogue raised her hand to knock on the door, but Professor Xavier's voice said, "Come in, Rogue," from the other side of the door. "This is very important," she said, hoping it wasn't another mission or danger room session. "That's really spooky," Rogue said as she opened the door and entered the room. Professor Xavier was seated behind his desk, and Kushina was leaning against the bookcase. Both of them were grinning. "You wanted to see me?" Confused, Rogue asked. "I got you a present," Kushina said with a smile. "I wanted you to have it now, even though it's a little early." She produced a small box that was wrapped in black and green paper. "Kushina was very adamant that it be given to you right away, so I may have told a small lie," Professor Xavier said with a laugh. "Really?" sighed Rogue. "Hey." Kushina narrowed her eyes. Rogue rolled her eyes with a small smile. She opened up the present. A gasp escaped her as she stared at a beautiful silver bracelet with rubies and gems in it. Kushina picked up and grabbed Rogue's hand, How much? Rogue never finished. Be quiet and accept my gift, Kushina said, snapping the bracelet onto Rogue's wrist. It glowed. And Rogue experienced an odd sensation. Kushina then took out another bracelet and snapped it onto Rogue's other wrist, saying, "There we go. How are you feeling?" "I feel strange," Rogue said, unable to explain why she felt as though something were missing. Rogue's bare face was touched by Kushina's raised hand. "What are—" Rogue paused. Realizing that nothing was happening, something wasn't right. She felt Kushina's hand on her cheek. Why wasn't she draining the older woman? A small drain started, and Kushina withdrew her hand. "Okay, it appears to be effective. I'm sure she was wondering why she wasn't draining me, and the seals took it personally," Kushina remarked. "That would make sense," Professor Xavier said with a smile. "Rogue, concentrate on not wanting to drain anyone instantly, don't ask yourself why. Are you ready?" A smile came to Rogue's face as she nodded, hoping against hope that this was working. "The bracelets have seals in them that regulate your power based upon your thoughts," Kushina said, touching her cheek. "In previous experiments, do you recall the seal I put on the back of your neck? Now, that seal is serving as a beacon for the other seals on your wristbands. The seals in your bracelets absorb your powers so you can touch and feel them when you don't want them to activate, and they deactivate when you want your powers to be active," Kushina explained. Kushina gasped as Rogue embraced her, and as she buried her head in the older woman's chest, tears streamed from her eyes. "Thank you," Rogue muttered, trying not to cry. Rogue couldn't have asked for a better day, but Kushina gave her a hug and said, "Merry Christmas." Christmas. Naruto put a hand over his mouth and turned to face Kurt, saying, "Oh my gosh, those are the sexiest hands ever. Hurry, get me a pair of gloves," he said. "I have to keep them safe from harm. My plans for their photos will be ruined." Rogue rolled her eyes and pulled her hands back, blushing slightly. "Shut up." Naruto and Kurt both started laughing, and she grinned. She hadn't worn gloves or long, body-covering clothes for the first time since she could remember, and she didn't feel like Michael Jackson all the time. Instead, she felt like a regular girl. "Kushina did a really nice thing," Scott said with a smile. "I'm happy you can be who you were at last. Just don't abuse your touching ability." Naruto smiled. "Unless you want to touch me." He winked. Rogue's cheek flushed, and she swung at Naruto, who leapt back to safety. With the exception of Naruto and Rogue, all of the students would be returning home to be with their families in a week, and Scott would be spending the holiday with his younger brother and his brother's foster family in Hawaii. Professor Xavier grinned as he observed his students enjoying an early Christmas. With a look of jealousy in her eyes, Jean turned away and returned to conversing with the other girls as she observed Naruto and Rogue hanging out. Take a break. While Rogue sat in a chair, bored to death, and Naruto was on the floor practicing a new seal he had received as a gift, Kushina, Professor Xavier, and Beast listened to the news. Professor Xavier turned on the news and said, "The woman says that a real-life angel turned up and saved this woman from a burning building. An enigmatic angel appears. I suspect that this angel is not an angel," Xavier remarked. Naruto looked at Professor Xavier and said, "Do you think he's a demon?" The Beast laughed. "I believe the professor means that if Cerebro weren't under repairs, then we would be getting a reading from this angel." "Exactly," Xavier replied. "Though I applaud him for his actions, I fear his recent activities will expose mutants." "I can go," Rogue replied. "I am going to die from boredom if I stay here any longer." Xavier laughed. "How about you, Naruto?" Naruto leapt to his feet and said, "Okay, I'm prepared." "Hold on, where are we heading?" Kushina massaged her temples, wishing he would be more aware of his surroundings. The city of New York. Everywhere Naruto and Rogue went, they asked eyewitnesses about the enigmatic angel. They always came away with the same story. A real angel had saved them or assisted them. They were unable to find any more details. "How do you feel about this angel?" Rogue asked, pushing a lock of hair out of her face. "I like him," Naruto grinned, "because he is doing just what I want to do after school, utilizing his abilities to assist others." "Are you really not planning to attend college?" Naruto looked at Rogue and said, "No, while I don't think college is useless, a degree isn't necessary for what I want to do. Everything I need to do what I want is already here. I also aspire to be a hero." Rogue grinned at Naruto, whom she always admired for knowing what he wanted out of life and not letting anything or anyone stop him from pursuing it. While most people would use their skills and abilities to improve their own lives, Naruto wanted to use his powers to help the others, so it didn't really surprise her when she considered it Naruto as Professor Xavier's protege and the first student to be under his care. Despite Scott and Jean being the oldest students at the institute, Professor Xavier had selected Naruto to be the leader of the X-Men. "How about you? Do you want to attend college?" Naruto inquired. At first, I couldn't control my powers, so I didn't. However, I kind of want to try it now, Rogue acknowledged. I think your powers are cool, not when you can't touch a single person. Everyone has abilities and limitations. Rogue blushed a little and smiled back at Naruto, who said, don't let that stop you from doing what you want. Come on, let's get something to eat. Naruto said, I'm going hungry. Bridge Magneto smirked as the crowd turned against the angel, claiming that it only took a small slip-up to reveal the true nature of these pitiful humans. He saw as the crowd attempted to seize Angel, accusing him of rescuing the girl who had fallen into the water, but it didn't matter because the seeds of distrust and hatred had already been sown. Angel swiftly fled as the crowd attempted to seize him, and soon it would be time to enlist the mutant to his acolytes. Hospital. Rogue approached the counter and said, pardon me, could you please tell me where Alice's parents are? In the hospital. Alice, the young girl who was knocked into the river by an angel, is unconscious and suffering from a high fever. The doctor gave them the name of the church and said, I think they went there to pray. When Rogue noticed a dashing doctor, she turned to look at him more closely, and as a feather dropped from his coat, her eyes grew wide. Naruto, it's him. Rogue yelled, and she fled after the man. Naruto followed her, saying, wait, we just want to talk. Rogue tripped after the phony doctor threw a cart in their direction, and Naruto grabbed her just as the enigmatic angel fled. Church. A new voice said, hello Warren, and Angel felt guilty because he had caused the little girl to fall from the bridge. Angel watched as the parents sat in the front aisle praying. Warren whirled around and said, who are you? I'm just like you. Magneto is my name. Did you believe that your unique gift was unique to you? I understand what you're going through. Magneto, who was floating in midair, said, feeling disoriented, perplexed, and uncertain of your position in the world. People just like us have a place. I'll introduce you to others if you come along. Angel turned away from Magneto and uttered, listen, whatever you are selling, I am not interested in buying, so leave me alone. Magneto's hand shot upward, and the candle pole bent toward Angel, who gasped in shock as it pinned him to the wall and slid out, pulling his wings in. What are you doing? Angel demanded. You ought to have shown up voluntarily when Magneto used his powers to throw a number of objects at Angel, he said. Now we will do this the hard way. Angel leapt off the edge and flew into the air, and Magneto used them to free the chandelier and have the chain wrap around his body and wings. Time to. A kunai sailed through the air, slicing through the chains that bound Angel, and Angel quickly spread his wings and flew out of a church window. Metal objects flew at Naruto and Rogue as they ran into the church, and Magneto glared at them, saying, do not interfere in matters that do not concern you. Futon. Repusho. Naruto pushed his right hand forward. The metal objects were blown away by a powerful gust of wind. Rogue checked on Alice's parents. I'll take care of this. Take care of me? My power is beyond the comprehension of a mere child. Magneto lifted up dozens upon dozens of metal objects. Naruto moved at high speeds, much to Magneto's annoyance. Magneto carried a magnetic shield. Naruto's fist struck the magnetic barrier before he was blasted backwards. He flipped backwards, landing on the side of the opposite wall. Metal pipes floated in front of Naruto. A grin appeared on Naruto's face as he formed a hand seal. Magneto heard a sizzling sound and looked up. There in the ceiling is a kunai with an explosive tag. Boom. An explosion shook the church. Magneto was blasted out of the church. When Naruto emerged from the roof hole prepared to fight on, Magneto glared at him and said, this isn't over. With those final words, Magneto took off. Hospital. What distinguishes Magneto's gang from Xavier's Institute, then? Warren scowled. We are not comparable to Magneto. Rogue frowned. He's on a serious power trip. Professor Xavier only wants to help mutants learn how to control their gifts to better help the world, Naruto said calmly. Like what you're doing with your abilities, no one will coerce you into joining the Institute. It will be entirely voluntary. We only ask that you visit the Institute so that you can talk to Professor Xavier, find out what we're about. After the doctor informed Alice's parents that Alice had woken up and would be fine, Warren hurried off to see how the girl was doing. Naruto and Rogue got up and asked, do you think he will come with us? Rogue inquired. No, said Naruto, smiling. The Xavier Institute. When she walked into Hank's lab, where he was working on a new science experiment, Kushina said, I need to talk to you. Hank tilted his head and looked up, the first time in his brief acquaintance with the woman that he had ever seen her so solemn. Kushina, like Naruto, is very carefree and only takes things seriously when fighting. What can I do for you? As Hank put his experiment away, he asked. I made those bracelets for Rogue. No matter where she is, the Brotherhood will undoubtedly inform Magneto or Mystique that Rogue has the ability to suddenly control her abilities. The real cause of it might be exposed. I came to the conclusion that if I could use seals to do it, there was no reason why advanced technology couldn't be used to subdue a mutant's powers. Please create such a device and then devise a countermeasure, Kushina said. A thoughtful expression came into Hank's eyes. She was right to point out that technology was getting better every day and that the weapons industry was expanding rapidly. Anti-mutant groups would undoubtedly view such a device as a weapon. I will see what I can do, Hank uttered. Kushina waved lightly before exiting the room, grinning and saying, thanks. Take a break. The elevator that led to the new construction area beneath the mansion was exited by Cyclops, who then proceeded to the edge of a large hole where Jean and Magma stood at the edge of an unfinished bridge, Jean assisting Magma in controlling her powers. Okay, remember to focus, said Jean, who was standing beside Amara. Amara said tremblingly, I don't think I am ready for this. It will be all right. Now use your powers to melt the rocks together. Jean used her telekinetic abilities to gather a good number of boulders and levitated the rocks between the two ledges. I'll be right here in case anything goes wrong. Magma massaged both hands. Okay, but if I mess up, I am not taking the blame. She became a magma woman as fire encircled her hands. She raised her hands and hit the rocks with a powerful blast of heat. All of the rocks melted together to form a stone bridge in a matter of seconds. Jean grinned. The two stepped forward onto the bridge and said, very good, now let's see how you did. It is good except for that crack. Amara let out a sigh. Then the training was a failure. No dealing with mistakes is part of the training. Jean laughed. Both of them looked up at a rumbling sound. A big boulder began to tumble loose. Magma, use your powers to melt that rock back into place. Okay. Magma fired a blast nervously. The boulder was missed. The boulder tumbled in their direction. I got it, Jean said, catching the boulder with her powers. The boulder exploded when a red beam struck it from behind. Cyclops grinned. Scott. Jean scowled as she and Amara levitated into the air. He seemed oblivious to the two girls' glares at him. Cyclops grinned and said, no need for thanks. It is what we heroes do, rescue damsels in distress. As she passed Cyclops, Jean frowned. Amara followed suit. Cyclops entered the elevator with a shrug. The doors shut. Jean narrowed her eyes at him, and he gulped as he turned his head. The elevator arrived at the higher floors. Jean and Amara left first. Cyclops said, Jean, wait, tell me what I did. Jean stabbed him in the chest and asked, what you did? You were a guy. Cyclops grinned. Sorry. Jean's eyes narrowed. She slammed her room door shut after opening it, saying, I was teaching Magma how to control her powers in tense situations. It didn't involve being rescued by some big macho guy. Amara gave Scott a fierce look before slamming her own door. Cyclops let out a sigh. Bavel. Amara sat down at her workstation. She would start high school on this day. Kitty had instructed her to watch the track team from the window seat. Naruto waved. Hey, taking a seat beside Amara. Naruto, Amara said with a grin. What are you doing here? Naruto let out a sigh. I failed it last semester, so I am taking it over. At least I know someone in it. How did your training session go this morning? Amara scowled. Jean has been pushing me really hard. I don't think I am ready, but she keeps insisting. Why don't you think you are ready? I don't know, it's just that I don't think I have that level of control over my powers yet, Amara replied. Naruto smiled. Well, you don't know until you try, right? So you fail 1 or 2 times, big deal. No one is expecting you to be perfect. My mother says that we all learn at our own pace. Amara was much happier. He had said exactly what Jean had said. She needed to quit striving for perfection and just follow Jean's wishes to learn at her own speed. Besides, Jean wasn't always so good at controlling her powers. There was this one time when she was 10. Naruto laughed after he finished telling Amara the story. The other students in the class began to stare at them curiously as they laughed. The Xavier Institute. As Jean ascended the front stairs, her expression was one of rage. Scott moved quickly out of her path. She complained angrily. Aurora and Kushina observed Jean's negative attitude. They exchanged glances. Aurora asked, Jean, would you come here for a moment? Jean said, I'm not really in a great mood. As she approached Professor Munro, Jean was shoved into the deserted study by Kushina. Aurora gave Kushina a headshake. Kushina shut the door behind him. So, what is wrong? Jean crossed both arms over her chest. It's Duncan and Scott, guys in general. I am tired of being treated like the weaker sex. Scott completely messed up my training with Amara trying to be a big shot hero. Duncan has the nerve to buy me tickets to the Sadie Hawkins dance when a girl is supposed to do the asking. Don't get me started on the other boys at school. Kushina burst out laughing. Jean looked irritated. Aurora smiled softly, soothingly. Jean, you must not let the actions of a few bother you so much. I can't speak for Duncan, but Scott has a great deal of respect for your abilities. All women go through the same thing. I grew up in a village that was male-dominated, and kunoichi are seen as weaker than shinobi. It is annoying. But the only way to shut those people who look down upon you up isn't by getting angry, it's by proving you are their equal or better than them, laughed Kushina. Jean sighed. I know, it's just so hard, she said. The door was knocked on. Come in, said Aurora. Amara stepped through the open door and into the room. Amara shifted uneasily. Sorry, I didn't mean to intrude, I just wanted to talk to Jean real quick, she said. Aurora said, we were finished anyway, and walked out of the room before departing. Kushina gave Jean a quick squeeze on the shoulder. Jean turned to face Amara. What did you want to talk about? Amara grinned. I would like another chance at the training exercise, I think I can do better this time. Jean questioned in surprise. Really? What changed your mind? Well, Amara said with a slight flush. I spoke with Naruto, he told me that you were only trying to help me out basically. He told me exactly what you said, he made realize that you really are trying to help me and not push me into something I am not ready to do. Room of danger. Naruto tapped the floor with his foot. He had learned the fundamentals of wind and water jutsu. Learning those two jutsu had been relatively simple, but he's having some difficulty with this fire jutsu. He was unable to grasp the most fundamental form of jutsu. He would have learned more sophisticated methods from his mother, but she was unaware of any. Kushina was an expert at using her unique chakra and seals. Although she had never been very skilled at it, she had always loved ninjutsu. He would need to develop his own methods using the knowledge he had gained about controlling and manipulating chakras. Jean went into the danger room and said, Naruto. Naruto waved. Hey, what brings you here, want to spar? Jean grinned. I came here to thank you, Amara told me what you said to her. Naruto smiled, he scratched the back of his head. I didn't tell her that much, just made sure she knew that she is learning from one of the strongest people I know and she should trust you to lead her down the right path. Thank you, Jean said. Leaning forward to give him a cheek kiss, she kissed the other side of his cheek for the second kiss. He stared at her in confusion. The second one is for helping me. I realize how foolish I have been acting. Man, I'm good, Naruto said with a smile. Jean raised her hand after rolling her eyes. Naruto was flung to the ground by a psychic blast. Hey. Jean grinned. Naruto smiled sheepishly and said, that is for telling Amara about the pie incident when I was 10. She laughed and walked out of the danger room. Naruto passed a deserted circus. He was dressed in black sweatpants and a simple white t-shirt. A week ago, he had visited Jean and Rogue with the same circus. The sole distinction is that it was crowded in the past. He looked up at the darkening clouds as there was a boom. There was a gloomy chuckle. Naruto turned to face a toy that was submerged in a pool of water on the ground. It's a clown toy. He approached it. The clown's smile was eerie. Naruto remarked, something doesn't feel right. The clown toy grew to unthinkable proportions and started to stand up. A second later, he looked surprised as he gazed up at the enormous toy. He heard more laughter and turned to see two more enormous clowns approaching him. Naruto was surrounded by 3 enormous clowns. Awesome. Naruto smiled as he got ready to launch an attack. This is becoming a really cool dream. Naruto opened his eyes in bed. He sat up. He climbed out of bed and strode over to his closest friend like a robot. After donning his X-Men gear, he created a hand seal and vanished in a leaf whirl. The following day in Bayville, Kushina jumped from roof to roof in an attempt to find her son. She had anger and worry in her eyes. Naruto would never vanish in the middle of the night and then never return. He had been absent for the last 6 hours. He hadn't been seen since yesterday. She intended to track him down and hold the person responsible for her son's abduction accountable. The Xavier Institute, Professor, he is not in Bayville, Jean said, panicking as she rushed into Cerebro. Kushina just contacted me. Kurt wasn't able to find him either. Cerebro was on Professor Xavier's head. The issue is that Naruto's mutant ability isn't his enhanced physical abilities or his ability to use chakra. I am trying to find him, but Naruto isn't actively using his powers. There is no mutation there. Both Kushina and Naruto had possessed those common skills from birth. An X gene develops during birth and causes a mutation. By placing his hand on the ground, Naruto's mutant ability allows him to detect all life sources within a half-mile radius. He develops a unique psychic bond with the earth. Hank raised his voice. Just received a call from Logan. Naruto went to the train station and bought a ticket to Boston. Boston in front of him. Naruto gazed at the steel gates. He landed lightly on his feet after making it over in a single leap. To the untrained eye, he was a blur as he bounded forward at Junin level speed. He ran up the side of the wall and reached the mansion in just 1 second. He stopped on a windowsill and triggered the alarm by kicking it open. The room was very nice and clean. When he walked in, there was only one thing he could look at: a stunning gold ring set with a red ruby sits on an altar, shielded by a thick glass box. A kunai slid into his hand with a quick flick of the wrist, slicing through the knife like a hot knife through butter. He directed his wind-natured chakra through it. The container's top slipped off and broke on the ground. He took the ring and put it in a pouch. The room's doors exploded open. 2 policemen entered with their weapons raised. Naruto extended his hand. The officers were knocked out of the room by a powerful gust of wind. He disappeared in a whirl of leaves, forming a hand seal. The Xavier Institute. It's a telepath, Kushina yelled, punching the wall. I'll kill whoever it is. Kurt and Scott left Kushina behind. Jean questioned, what exactly did he steal? Maybe it'll give us a clue to where he will go next. Hank frantically typed on the computer beside him. Kitty is searching on her own. The police reports haven't been released yet. I am trying to hack into Boston Police Department computers, stated Hank. Kitty displayed a picture. Kushina hurried to Kitty and exclaimed, I found him. The monitor displayed Naruto transferring a ticket, saying, he is catching a plane to New York City. Xavier, the professor, nodded. Kushina, Wolverine, and Jean take the jet. Jean try to break the mental connection that is controlling Naruto. Right, Jean said as she hurried out of the room, trailing Kushina and Wolverine. City of New York. Teal Bank. As Naruto entered the bank, he kicked the doors aside. Each camera was punctured by a shuriken that flew through the air after an arm swing. His gaze was fixed entirely on the vault. As he passed through the bank, he pulled 2 kunai with explosive tags out of his pouch. Wind nature chakra was infused into the kunai. When he threw the kunai, it was able to penetrate the steel vault. The tags for the explosives started to sizzle. The bank was filled with a huge explosion. A huge hole in the wall was visible when the smoke cleared. Naruto entered the safe. He proceeded to safety box 802. He took out a green gem set in a gold ring. After opening it with the first ring, Naruto put it in his pouch. Kushina stood outside the hole and exclaimed, Naruto. Wolverine's claws came into action. Snap out of it, brat. Jean's thoughts reached out. She made Naruto think. A picture of a man with numerous tattoos on his face surfaced. She let out a scream before being knocked to the ground by the mental backlash. Jean muttered, Mesmero? Naruto bounded forward. Wolverine was hit in the stomach by a knee before he could react. A right uppercut knocked the man off his feet as Wolverine keeled over, leaning back. Naruto took hold of an arm when Kushina attempted to twist away. Naruto deftly maneuvered by pinning her arm behind her back. She opened her hand, put a seal on his chest, and grinned. I am more familiar with my son's fashion sense than you are. She cried in agony as lightning sped through her body. He had sealed her fist with his own. Kushina fell to the ground, twitching his muscles. Jean was standing in front of him and said, Naruto, please get over this. You can fight this. He continued to move forward. She lifted her arms, preparing to strike him. Naruto was hit by a telekinetic push that sent him crashing into the distant wall. He turned to a log in a cloud of smoke behind Jean. Naruto exploded from the earth. A blow to the back of Jean's head caused her eyes to widen. Stunned, she fell to the ground. Kushina made contact. Naruto vanished in a leaf whirl. Wolverine rose slowly and said, damn, has he always been that fast and strong? Kushina gritted her teeth and said, this isn't good. Naruto always holds back in spars so that he doesn't harm anyone. The person controlling him has removed those mental restraints. We won't be able to handle him even with the full team. Without a proper strategy, it would be easier to go for the telepath controlling him. Jean raised her voice. I know who it is, the Xavier Institute. I found it. Those 3 rings are part of a set ancient Tibetan rings, replied Hank. He found an article and read it. The 3rd ring is located in Washington at the Museum of Ancient Equities. With his eyes closed, Professor Xavier used Cerebro to communicate with Jean in his mind. Hank awaited the plan's announcement. We will let Naruto get the last ring. Jean has sent me a mental image of the mutant controlling Naruto. I need you to find the location of the circus that was in Bayville a week ago, stated Xavier. We will be setting our targets upon a mutant known as Mesmero. The Museum of Ancient Equities in Washington. They threw a security device into the wall after dodging 2 bullets. Naruto turned on his heel and kicked 2 security guards in the face, unconscious. The men fell to the ground. He went on toward the display that contained the last ring. The circus. Outside the circus, the X-Jet touched down. Professor Xavier's mind reached out in an attempt to locate Naruto. Naruto is not far from us. We need to hurry and find Mesmero, replied Xavier. Kushina scowled. Mesmero better pray I don't find him first. Spread out, stated Wolverine. The jet was evacuated by the X-Men before long. They were searching the circus for Mesmero. Jean was the first to sense him. Naruto. She turned to see Naruto emerge from a smoke cloud. The Nightcrawler swallowed. Rogue and Shadowcat both thought, this is not good. Cyclops held up a hand to his visor. Tensing, Jean's expression became anxious. Naruto is the most powerful person they have ever encountered, and the 5 of them knew this better than anyone else. Naruto is unmatched in terms of power and abilities, but Magneto and Mystique are more crafty. There is a reason why Naruto is the X-Men's leader. Both Storm and Wolverine admired his skills. Stick to the plan, Wolverine snarled, his claws lifted. A beam fired by Cyclops caused Naruto to flip backwards. He threw a dozen shuriken in mid-flip. Outlaw Wolverine and Cyclops ducked quickly. The shuriken was phased through by Shadowcat. Jean created a shield to protect herself using her powers behind Naruto. Nightcrawler teleported as Nightcrawler reached for air. Naruto ducked low and spun around, sweeping out Nightcrawler's legs. "I got," Nightcrawler said using the momentum. Naruto turned around and slammed both feet into the chest of a Nightcrawler. In midair, Nightcrawler flew into a tent in reverse. Emerging from the earth, Shadowcat proceeded to attack Naruto after turning around and snatching her arm. Naruto flipped her onto his back and onto the ground as claws slashed through the air. He stepped aside just in time to avoid breaking her arm. Wolverine made every effort to strike Naruto. Naruto quickly pulled out two kunai and stabbed Wolverine in the shoulders. Arg! Wolverine let out a painful growl. Wolverine was knocked to the ground by a front kick to the chest. Cyclops blasted Naruto with a strong beam. Naruto avoided being pushed back by several beams. Jean hold him. Jean grabbed Naruto with her powers. Naruto was locked onto by Cyclops. She gave Scott a quick look. Naruto fought to break free. Jean let Naruto go as Cyclops fired. Naruto took a step back. Jean. In a flash of speed, Naruto disappeared. Cyclops was caught across the jaw by a right hook. In order to drain Naruto's energy, Rogue went to seize him. He crouched and pushed his elbow into her stomach. Rogue fell backwards, clutching her stomach in pain. Naruto looked over at Jean. Jean put up a strong shield. Naruto repeatedly kicked and punched the shield. Her shield began to deteriorate, and she winced in agony with every blow. "Naruto, please stop." Jean's eyes were watering. "This is not how you were meant to use your powers. The Naruto I know would never use his powers to harm his friends." Behind Naruto, Kushina emerged after catching her punch with his uplifted hand. Naruto twisted her arm around and slammed her face into the ground. Kushina hesitated, then cursed she couldn't have attacked him from behind like that because he is her son. Her skin turned completely black. She was unable to move. Xavier the professor rolled forward. He glanced over at a tent. "Jean there." Jean tore the tent in two with her powers. A man with odd facial markings is inside, dressed in a purple cloak. "Mesmero," Xavier scowled. "You may be able to control his mind, but how do you fare against mine?" Mesmero clutched his aching head. Xavier threw all of his might at Mesmero. Mesmero collapsed to the ground. Xavier sensed it at that moment. He was knocked out of his wheelchair by a much stronger force that struck his mind. Naruto came forward and gave Mesmero the key pouch. Mesmero grabbed the pouch, said, "You have no idea of the power you are dealing with, Xavier," and fled. Naruto approached Jean. He made a flawless Rasengan with his uplifted hand. Jean did not move. She was no longer strong enough to fight. Naruto hesitated before pushing his hand forward as the Rasengan vanished. He blinked multiple times. "Huh?" Naruto got to his feet, perplexed. "What is going on?" "Naruto." Jean grinned. Naruto rubbed his temples, asking, "Jean, what am I doing here?" "Take a break." Gazing out over the front yard, Naruto sat on the roof. The look in his eyes was one of guilt. He had discovered that he had turned into a criminal by abusing his abilities and powers. Even worse, he had attacked and injured his friends with them. Kushina sat down beside him. "Going to sit up here all day and sulk?" "I know it wasn't me still. If I had been stronger then that bastard would have never been able to control my mind," replied Naruto. His eyes took on an angry expression. "Maybe, but I know that you did fight against the control. At least subconsciously you could have killed us all, yet you only used your abilities to disable and knock out. Mesmero couldn't truly control you," Kushina replied. Naruto let out a sigh. "That doesn't excuse what I did." "Then become stronger. Develop a way to fight against mental attacks. My son never gives up no matter how hard things become." Kushina laughed, "And that is why I am so proud of him." Naruto's face lit up with a smile. Then he leapt up. Naruto exclaimed, "Yosh, more training huh? I love it." With a broad smile, Kushina chuckled. He would be alright. She knew Mesmero was unaware that his actions would later make her son even more resilient. Unknown place. Mesmero entered a cavern tucked away in the mountains. It revealed a spacious cavern with an oddly patterned stone door. There is a single key-sized hole on the door. He extracted a gold rod that was 6 inches long from his pocket. Then he extracted the rings and set them on the gold rod to create an old-fashioned key. Mesmero twisted the key after inserting it into the hole. As the stone wall rose up into the ceiling, there was a sound like an unlocking. A second door opened up behind it. There was a spider design on this door. Soon the world will know its greatest ruler, Apocalypse. Bavel. "Hey Naruto, how about we don't pull a prank at the dance, okay?" replied Kurt. Naruto smiled. "Did Amanda ask you out?" Kurt reddened. "Well, not yet, but her friends say she likes me." "Okay, number prank at the dance. I figure I owe you few since you always had my back for all the pranks we have done in the past." Naruto and Kurt bumped fists and said, "Thanks man." As Kurt left for class, he waved. Naruto proceeded down the corridor. Just as he was about to greet Kitty, he saw her approach Lance. As he watched the girl invite Lance to the dance, A smile came to his face. Lance was so ecstatic that he made the school tremble slightly. Kitty waved to him, giggling. Scott approached Naruto from behind, upset that Kitty asked Lance. Naruto let out a laugh. Kitty is cute and I like her, but her asking someone else out doesn't bother me. That isn't saying I didn't want her to ask me, said Naruto. Scott smirked and said, I forgot that you'll chase after any girl. Naruto smiled. His eyes were knowing as he said, I don't like to be picky. Still waiting for Jean to ask you? Scott's cheek turned red. Actually, Terrence just asked me. I decided to go with her. She is nice, Scott replied. Naruto added, good for you, man, to his friends. Congratulations. Seriously, do you plan on going? Scott asked, holding Naruto in his gaze. I know several girls have already asked you. How come you turned them down? Naruto threw up a wave and left. Scott scowled and said, I'll see you later, Shades. Take a break. Sitting at her table, Rogue gazed at Naruto. Kurt, who is anxious about the dance, is being teased by Naruto. Kurt had apparently been invited to the dance by the girl he liked. Her eyes were anxious as she gazed down at her home. If you like him, then why don't you just ask him to the dance? Laughed Risty. Rogue spluttered, what? I don't like him like that. Naruto is just a friend. Risty grinned. Right? Rogue blushed and turned away. Well, it looks like you were about to lose your chance? Jean approached the table where Kurt and Naruto were seated. Kurt's face lit up with a smirk when he saw Jean first as Kurt fled. Naruto got a perplexed expression and said, I'll see you later. He cocked his head, perplexed what caused Kurt to depart in that manner. Hey Naruto, said Jean uneasily. Naruto smiled. He cocked his head and said, Hi Jean, you going to sit down? She sat down beside him, a flush warming her cheeks. Jean said, well, I had a question for you. Naruto gave a nod. Do you want to go with me to the dance? Naruto's expression changed to one of surprise. His gaze expanded. Jean looked at the table and then back into his eyes. Blushing, Naruto asked, did you just ask me to the dance? Jean reddened. Yeah. With a nervous shift, Naruto asked, aren't you going with Duncan? I never asked him. He invited himself as my date, Jean said, a little anger showing. Naruto reddened. Jean grinned and said, okay. I mean, yes, I would like to go to the dance with you. He chuckled. I never thought you would ask me. I thought we were just friends. After giving him a cheek kiss and whispering, Jean grinned. She blushed and waved lightly as she walked away from the table, saying, you thought wrong. Naruto smiled foolishly as he washed her away. One individual wasn't overly excited about it. The Xavier Institute. Rogue hurried up the stairs to her room, and Kushina watched. She was aware that Naruto had been invited to the Sadie Hawkins dance by Jean. The woman was aware that Rogue was smitten with Naruto as well. She wouldn't interfere because she liked Jean and Rogue. It was up to Naruto to decide who he wanted to spend his time with. Take a break. Naruto, dressed in a smart black suit, stood outside. He detested it. The suit is really restrictive. It was not his style to dress like this. He enjoyed having the ability to fight at any time. Call it paranoia. As Jean walked out the front door, all of those thoughts left his head. She was dressed in a strapless black dress that accentuated all of her curves. It dropped to the ground, dragging a little. He had been given a nice view of her cleavage, but he had to take his eyes off of it, observing the path his gaze took. Jean grinned. Hi, she said with a smile. Hey, Naruto said naively. Jean covered her mouth with her hand to conceal her laughter. He gave him a forehead slap. You look great, I mean beautiful. Jean laughed. I think you look very handsome as well. Naruto smiled as he pointed to the red convertible Mustang. He said, thanks, I borrowed my mom's car. Jean was able to enter after he opened the door for her. He slid across the hood with a smile on his face. He dropped into the driver's seat, and Jean rolled her eyes. Dance by Sadie Hawkins. Everyone is enjoying themselves at the dance. Principal Kelly kept a stern gaze on Naruto and Kurt as he watched the school pranksters. Or those two, they were going to try something. He knew they did it every time. Kurt and Naruto were too preoccupied with their dates to give anything a shot while Naruto is dancing with Jean. Kurt is dancing with Amanda. Naruto's face lit up with a smile. Naruto said, I am so glad I hit a growth spurt, or this would feel so weird, with a little laugh. Jean rolled her eyes. Really? You would have turned me down if you hadn't grown 2 inches to be the same height as me? I'm very conscious of my height, Naruto said, putting his nose up. They both laughed together. A mellow tune began to play. Jean encircled Naruto's neck with her arms. He touched her waist with his hands as they danced. They both looked into each other's eyes. She was shocked to find herself with the boy she had always admired. Jean's crush on Naruto dates back to their childhood. It was he who helped her realize that her abilities were a gift rather than a curse. He was always there for her when she needed someone to confide in or lean on, although not in the same manner as Naruto. Scott had also supported her. Despite the passage of time, a number of other boys had dated her. She didn't feel the same way about any of them at the moment. Jean put her lips to his as she leaned forward. At first, Naruto was taken by surprise. He quickly began kissing her in return right there on the dance floor. The two fell in love. "Yeah," Kurt exclaimed. Jean and Naruto split apart, their blushes matching as Naruto pushed his hand at Kurt. They both grinned. Kurt and his date fell to the ground after stumbling into each other due to a slight gust of wind. Jean laughed. She teased, "What's the matter? Can't take a joke?" Naruto smiled and said, "Not when interrupts a makeout session with my girlfriend." Jean smiled and drew him in for a second, hotter kiss. "Take a break, Xavier." The professor rolled into the room. He waited patiently as the door was closed behind him. The Brooklyn Mental Institute. Is this a high-security facility for people with more serious mental health issues? The primary cause of its high level of security was a very special visitor. Alarms began to sound. Knowing what that meant, Xavier let out a sigh. He used his telepathy to reach out. He gently leads the individual to his room. In his mind, there is some mental control involved, but he had to protect the others inside. The door eventually opened, and a girl entered. She wore a white jumpsuit and has shoulder-length black hair, making her very attractive. With gentle words, "Calm down, Wanda," Xavier said. Grabbing her head, Wanda quickly collapsed to her knees in order to prevent her powers from becoming unmanageable. Xavier calmed her down gently. She quickly relaxed. "I want to help you, but I can't if you keep flying out of control like this," Xavier replied. Wanda uttered, "Just get me out of here." Xavier let out a sigh. "There will always be a place for you at the Institute. I can't take you there in your current state of." The door swung open. A dashing doctor entered. "Excuse me, Professor Xavier. I have to cut your visit short. I have to take Wanda down to radiology for some more MI scans." "I understand," Xavier said with a nod. "Wanda, please go and don't cause any more trouble. I will do my best to get you out of here as soon as I can." Wanda emotionlessly went with the doctor to get to the guardroom. The two descended the stairs. The doctor smiled as he presented his identification. They were allowed entry by security. The two moved on. Wanda looked at the radiology sign above the door. She glanced up at the physician. "Don't panic and keep moving," the physician advised. Wanda began to lose control of her power. The walls began to crumble. The ceiling started to collapse. The doctor hurried her to the exit and down the stairs. An elderly woman in all black waited outside before grabbing Wanda's face. The elderly woman chanted in a gypsy dialect. Wanda felt her mind becoming calm. Just like with Xavier, the doctor, dressed in a black top and a black skirt with slits on either side, transformed into Mystique and said, "Good job." After changing into a security guard, Mystique said, "I'll be right back. I have some unfinished business inside," and made her way back inside the structure. The Xavier Institute rogue yelled, "Rogue!" as she watched Naruto slip down the railing. "Hey, I am headed to the mall. Want to come with me?" Naruto was brushed aside by Rogue. "No thanks, I have things to do." Naruto scowled. Did he offend her in any way? Confused, he scratched the back of his head. Rogue made her way to her room upstairs to find out if Risty wanted to hang out. She would call her. Rogue turned to see Kushina leaning against the wall and asked, "So are you going to be mad at him from now on?" Kushina looked bored and at ease. "I don't know what you..." Kushina stepped forward and said, "Rogue, I think of you like a daughter. I also see Jean as a daughter. I want you both to be happy, so don't think for a moment I favor one of you over the other. For the first time in your life, you have the opportunity to get close to someone and you aren't doing anything about it. If you like a person, then don't be scared to go after them. Don't give up because they are seeing someone else, at least not until they are married." Rogue looked surprised and asked, "Are you telling me to steal Naruto away from Jean?" Kushina chuckled. "I am telling you not to be scared. Just because they're dating doesn't mean Naruto has made a final decision. He hasn't fallen in love with Jean or you or any other girl for that matter." Rogue crossed her arms over her chest. Her final words before leaving Rogue alone were, "And don't push him away. Naruto cares for you that much. I know as a fact he always will, no matter who he is with." For eternity. Toad opened the door and said, "I am heading out," and he let out a scream. A kick to the face sent him flying into the stairwell, prompting him to ask, "Is it really you?" Mystique came into the building, her eyes full of rage. "Yeah, it is you," moaned Toad. Fred's gaze expanded. Pietro and Lance came in and said, "Mystique?" As the boys gazed at the woman, they were filled with surprise. Mystique grinned. "That's right, I am back. I see you all have made a mess of my home." "We were thinking of cleaning it up," Fred gulped. "Pathetic." Mystique gave them a scowling look. "What happened to the elite group of mutants I assembled?" Pietro raised his voice. "Hey, we are just as strong as ever." Her eyes were fixed on Lance. "Oh yeah? When was the last time you beat the X-Men?" "Let's see, never," she said. Lance averted his eyes with a guilty expression and said, "One of you is dating them. It is time I make some changes, starting with a new member. Meet the newest member of the Brotherhood." The Mystique moved aside. A girl in tight black jeans and a red top came in. Pietro's gaze expanded. Wanda. Wanda squinted her eyes. Pietro. Wanda was furious. The house started to tremble. Fred screamed as he was hurled into the distant wall by an unseen force leaping behind a couch. Toad, Lance, and Pietro dashed into the living room. Toad gave Pietro a quick look. Ex-girlfriend? With terrified eyes, Pietro exclaimed, "Worse, she's my sister." Lance nearly got struck by a plate. "Do something, stop her." "Like what?" Pietro gave Lance a stern look. "We don't get along if you can't see." Chanting, an elderly woman entered the room. Wanda began to sway. Her abilities started to subside. The woman took Wanda away at Mystique's request. "What were you thinking bringing Wanda here? She can't control her powers. It is like she is some type of witch," said Pietro. "That is exactly why I brought her. With her powers you will finally be able to crush the X-Men," laughed Mystique. "Yeah, and how do you expect us to work together? I am not exactly her favorite person," Pietro replied. Mystique grinned. "I brought in Agatha Harkins to train the girl. She will learn to get along with you." The Xavier Institute. Jean and Naruto were watching TV in the living room with her head resting against Naruto's chest and his arms encircling her body. Jean lies between his legs. The two were at ease. Neither of them was really watching the movie as they enjoyed being in each other's embrace. Naruto felt a weird sensation. He sat up and suddenly became very protective of Jean. Jean gave him a questioning glance. When Naruto looked back, he saw Professor Xavier rolling in their direction. "Naruto, Jean, please go gather the others. I have an important matter to discuss with you all in the library." Xavier walked away. Naruto watched as Professor Xavier headed to the library. Jean said, "Naruto, come on," and got to his feet. "Yeah, I'm coming," Naruto replied. "Take a break." Alongside Professor Xavier were Naruto, Jean, Scott, Kurt, Kitty, Rogue, and Kushina. As he began to address them, Professor Xavier's face was extremely serious. "I have numerous sessions with Wanda. She has a tortured mind, and combined that with her mutant abilities it makes her a danger to herself and others," stated Xavier. Jean had a sad look. Who is the source of her anger? Her father. He had abandoned her when she developed her mutant powers. Someone helped her escape from the Institute, and I fear that person may be wanting to use her powers against us," stated Xavier. Naruto gazed at Xavier. The professor. He kept getting this weird feeling. He had been experiencing the same emotion around Rogue's friend Risty. Naruto said, "Professor, can't you use Cerebro to find her?" Xavier gave a headshake. Xavier felt cold steel against his throat. "I can only detect her when she is using her powers." Scott said, "Whoa, Kushina, what are you doing?" Kushina narrowed her eyes. "You're not Professor Xavier, are you, Mystique?" The other person's eyes widened in shock. Naruto never refers to Charles as Professor. Kushina stabbed Xavier in the leg with the kunai, saying, "I don't know what you were talking about. I merely thought Naruto Charles is paralyzed from the waist don't and wouldn't have been able to feel that," stated Kushina. Scott got to his feet and grabbed his shades. Kitty and Rogue stiffened. Kurt leapt onto the sofa. Professor Xavier changed into a Mystique with blue skin. "Impossible, there is no way you could have known," Mystique said, giving Naruto a fierce sidelong glance. "I can't explain it, but I get this weird feeling around you. I was getting it from Duncan at the dance as well," Naruto replied. "I also got it from Risty." Kushina grinned. "It is a rare ability, the ability to sense negative emotions. That must be another mutant gift, a psionic ability that allows you to sense the negative feelings of others." Mystique attempted to transform, but her arms and legs were pinned to the wheelchair by ninja wire that was wrapped around her body. Kushina gave the order, "Kids leave, I have business with Mystique." Kushina glared at them, but no one argued. The children hurried out of the room. Another kunai was stabbed into Mystique's other leg by Kushina. With a chilly, emotionless expression in his eyes, Kushina said, "I suggest you start talking without Charles here to stop me. I am going to show you how ruthless I can really be." Mystique felt a tremendous surge of murderous intent, and her eyes grew wide. Naruto made his way to the Brotherhood's residence. They all knew its location, but he had never been there. As if everyone in the Brotherhood is aware of the location of the Xavier Institute. Mystique had taken that girl away. He was going to talk to her and give her a chance to join the Institute. He clenched his fists in rage, and a hard look came into his eyes. The old man had fallen victim to Mystique. How? The old man's telepathic powers must have been overcome by her. That infuriated him even more. Even though Mesmero is weaker than the old man, Mystique had already vanquished him. If she can do it, so can I, Naruto reasoned. Blob and Avalanche came out. Avalanche asked, "Where do you think you are going, pretty boy?" Blob grinned and said, "I say we break his bones." Blob tried to be intimidating by cracking his knuckles. "I came here to speak with Wanda. She needs to know the truth," Naruto said. Avalanche grinned. Toad leapt out of a window as Quicksilver ran outside and said, Wanda is with us now. You want her, then you'll have to go through us. Too bad you came alone. We'll make sure to send you back to your buddies in pieces. The Cyclops stepped forward and said, he didn't come alone. Jean descended from the sky. Nightcrawler, Shadowcat, and Rogue teleported in. Startled, Naruto turned to face his friends. He had informed them that he was heading to the shopping center. We're not stupid, Cyclops grinned. The X-Men stick together. Naruto smiled. He knelt down and touched his finger to the floor, saying, I guess you're right. I can sense her in the backyard with another. Can you all handle these guys? Jean grinned. Go ahead. Rogue grinned and said, yeah, we can take these losers. Naruto disappeared in a whirlpool of leaves after creating a hand seal. Take a break. Wanda gazed around her at the green flames. Do not fear the flames, control them. Channel your anger into a weapon. Do not let it consume you, Agatha advised. Wanda tried to concentrate. I am trying. She said, a recollection of her father permitting her to enter the institute. He did nothing when she yelled for him to assist her as a young child. Pietro stood beside her father, unsure of what to do. Magneto gave up his daughter and stared emotionlessly as Wanda was pulled away. Wanda let out a cry of anger. The flames burst forth. Agatha let out a sigh and waved her hands to extinguish the flames. When Naruto emerged in a cloud of smoke, Agatha turned her head. She started to cast a spell but stopped when a wave of murderous intent hit her. Her whole body went cold. For the first time in years, the elderly witch experienced fear when Naruto said, I didn't come here to fight. Who are you? Shouted Wanda. Naruto grinned. Wanda narrowed her eyes and said, the name is Naruto Namikaze. I am an X-Man and a member of the Xavier Institute. I wanted to speak with you. Wanda looked at him curiously. About what? I know you used to be at an institute for special reasons. I don't know why the old man never got you out, but he had his reasons. Mystique may had freed you, but she is no savior, said Naruto with determination. She only wants to use your powers for her own desires and cares nothing for you. Wanda accused him, and I suppose you want me to come over and be an X-Man? What makes you so different from her? Naruto's face lit up with a smile. I don't want you to become an X-Man. I don't even want you to come to the Xavier Institute. Well, I sort of do. You are pretty hot, but I have a girlfriend now, so you being there would only get me into trouble. Naruto raised his arms. Wanda looked disbelieving. Her cheeks turned a pale shade of red. Anyway, what I want is for you to simply know the truth about Mystique. If you want to come to the Xavier Institute, the doors are open. That is your decision to make. I only came here to make sure you knew the truth, and now you do, so I will be going. Naruto waved before turning to leave. Wanda watched in surprise as he left. Agatha gazed at the child's back. She was suddenly overcome with a sense of destiny. Her gaze expanded. It is fate that touches that child. She was aware that he would play a significant role in the future. Prison at Stokes Security. There was lightning and thunder. Lightning struck the telephone lines and generators as storms flew through the air. The prison went dark as a result of the generators blowing up. That would temporarily cut the power. Storm said into her earpiece, I have done my part. You have 10 minutes before the secondary generators restore power. Within the jail, Wolverine cut the wall with his blade. It was knocked over by a kick. Kushina, who had sneaked in earlier, fell from a vent. They exchanged glances as they dashed through the shadowy compound. Other security features, including cameras, were turned off. Kushina stopped in front of a door made of steel. This is it. Wolverine pushed the door with his claws. He made a big hole in it. Kushina rushed in, smelling the air to make sure no one else was approaching. Wolverine followed. According to Kushina, this is the top of the tank. Wolverine cut open the top and said, Mystique has improved to slip the professor in and the juggernaut out without anyone noticing. Charles was floating in the green paralysis liquid when Kushina looked down, pulling him out. She reached down. The professor was lifted by Wolverine and thrown over his shoulder. Kushina produced a scroll for storage. A bloody, unconscious Mystique emerged in a cloud of smoke. A chill went through Wolverine's body. He had witnessed and experienced torture numerous times. Mystique had been severely damaged by Kushina. He immediately reminded himself not to annoy her. Kushina said, sweet dreams, and lowered Mystique into the tank. Wolverine grinned. Ready? Let's get out of here. Take a break, Xavier. The professor rolled into the living room. Professor, Kitty grinned. I'm glad you're okay, Scott said. Yeah, I was major worried, Kurt acknowledged. Rogue's expression was worried. Did Mystique do anything to you? Jean gave Professor Xavier an embrace with a kind smile. Professor Xavier said, thank you all for your concern. I am fine. Mystique caught me by surprise. I'll be more careful in the future. Naruto smiled. Jean gave Naruto a slap across the head and asked, did you enjoy your vacation, old man? I wish I could have spent in a more sunny location. Professor Xavier grinned. On his face the pupils chuckled. Underground labs. The Institute of Xavier. Against a wall, Kushina leaned. Logan sipped a cold one while seated in a chair. Professor Xavier took a seat. The doors parted. Aurora and Hank came into the room. Every adult had assembled. The words, "Good you are all here," Xavier said. "During my run-in with Mystique, I was able to get a bit of information from her mind. The reason she wanted me out of the way is that Magneto is planning something. She wants to fight against him. Mystique wants revenge for being discarded and abandoned." Logan let out a grunt. Kushina gave a chilly smile and said, "She got what she deserved." "I wonder what Magneto is planning that it scares Mystique in taking a huge risk by going after you," Aurora replied. Hank gave his chin a rub. "Magneto believes that a war is coming, a war between mutants and non-mutants. Perhaps he plans to make the first strike." Kushina nodded and said, "I'd have to agree on that one. In war, the side that can launch an unsuspecting attack upon its enemies gains a huge advantage." Professor Xavier looked serious. "Yes, I fear as much as well. That is why I will be having Cerebro on full alert for any mutant activities." "Keep it looking for Sabretooth. No doubt he is with Magneto," said Logan. "We can't act rash, Logan. One small mistake and we can end up failing to prevent whatever Magneto has planned, so we will stick together and keep an eye on the students." "Kushina, can you keep an eye on the Brotherhood?" replied Xavier. Kushina grinned. "Consider it done." Room of danger. Naruto was already training when Rogue walked into the danger room. When she couldn't find him in his room, she suspected he would be in here. He's with Jean, training, or sleeping. Luckily, Jean isn't with him. Naruto's right hand went up. He formed a perfect Rasengan in 3 seconds. The chakra whirled in all directions. He concentrated on directing his wind-natured chakra toward it. It vanished because he was not paying attention to the Rasengan. He let out a sigh. Rogue asked, "What is that move?" Naruto smiled proudly and said, "It is called the Rasengan. My father invented it. My mother taught it to me when I was 14. It took me a whole year to master. I used to need 2 hands to form it." "Looks powerful," said Rogue. Naruto smiled. He frowned and said, "Of course it is my most powerful technique. Unfortunately, it is incomplete. My mother told me that my father had wanted to combine the Rasengan with an elemental nature that would complete the technique, making it the ultimate attack. I haven't had much luck doing it though." Rogue's face broke into a smile. Naruto smiled and scratched the back of his head, saying, "If anyone can do it, then it is you." Rogue gazed at the floor and said, "I am still a bit shaken that Mystique got the drop on the professor." Rogue felt Naruto's hand on her shoulder. Then Rogue's eyes widened in surprise. "No, you're not. You're upset because Risty had become your best friend and it had been Mystique all along." She nodded and sighed. "To lose a friend hurts. I can't imagine that type of pain. I'm sorry that I didn't say anything earlier, but I knew how much having Risty as a friend meant to you. Now I feel like I should have said something." Rogue grinned. Naruto blinked and said, "Thank you." A lock of hair was pushed from her face. "I know why you didn't say anything, and I appreciated Risty may have been a friend, but I got many others. Plus, you've always been a much better friend." Naruto reddened. I try. Well, I am going to sleep. Night, Naruto." Night, Rogue. In the Babel sewers, Boris observed his soldiers finishing the Sentinel project's last phases. The man wore a thick black mustache and short black cropped hair. He was dressed in military garb. His eyes took on a stern expression. A soldier saluting said, "Sir, the Sentinel is operational. We just need a target to test it upon." Sentinel. It is the ideal weapon to combat the threat posed by mutants. His time in S.H.I.E.L.D. had taught him about mutants. He warned S.H.I.E.L.D. that mutants pose a threat to society. But S.H.I.E.L.D. ignored him. He had therefore gone off to battle the mutants alone to defend the world against mutants. He would employ the Sentinel project. Boris said, "Find me some mutants, take a break." There were 5 metal spheres in the air over the city of Babel. The sphere passed. The sphere landed after flying into a construction yard with a broad grin. Sabretooth emerged from the first sphere. Sabretooth flexed his muscles and growled. A good-looking man emerged from the second sphere. He had black-red eyes with black pupils and shuffled a deck of cards. The man shuffled the cards with a charming smirk. A man in all red, carrying a fuel tank on his back, was inside the third sphere. There were flame-shooting devices on his arms. The man laughed and blasted out the fire, making it resemble a skull. The fourth sphere became visible. From the sphere came a big, 6'7" man of Russian ancestry. A bodybuilder would be jealous of his protruding muscles. An organic metal alloy began to cover the man's entire body, and he flexed his arms. The biggest sphere became visible. Magneto left the sphere in a flying motion. The Xavier Institute in Babel. Professor Xavier found 3 new mutants beside the other 3. A 4th mutant signature that belonged to Sabretooth appeared as he displayed a picture of every mutant on the screen. He had a severe expression. Magneto appeared to have made up his mind to approach at last. "X-Men, let's get together." Building site. Naruto touched the ground while kneeling. "I detect 4 signatures." On a metal sphere, Nightcrawler teleported. "They are all empty. Wait, you say 4, there are 5 spheres." That means one of them is hiding. I bet it is probably Magneto, Rogue responded. Naruto questioned, Cyclops, are you in position? On the roof of the deserted warehouse stood Cyclops. I am in position. Jean soared through the air. Gazing down at the building site, she squinted at Sabretooth and another mutant who had not been named. I got two of them. With a roar, Sabretooth leapt for Wolverine. Wolverine managed to jump out of the way just in time. Rolling to his feet with his claws out, each of the two mutants gave the other a growl. Beast, back up, Wolverine, commanding Naruto. Copy that, Beast said as he made his way to Sabretooth and Wolverine. Shadowcat cried out, ah, as a blaze of fire erupted before her as he turned the flames into a lion. Pyro grinned as he sent the lion after Shadowcat. He started laughing as the clouds grew darker. A torrential downpour started. Pyro gave Storm a fierce look. Kushina strolled among the boxes. A shadow moved, drawing a kunai. She threw it at the shadow. You sure are a pretty one. The name be Gambit, said a dapper man who emerged from the shadows with a smile. Kushina grinned and said, sorry, I don't go for weaklings. Gambit pulled out a card. Energy surged through the card as it read, I be anything but weak, my feisty beauty. It flew at Kushina with a simple wrist flick. She lowered herself, allowing it to pass over her head. It detonated like a tiny grenade when it hit a crate. Kushina was forced backwards by Gambit's subsequent card toss. Before he fled, he blew a kiss at her. A steel beam that had been thrown at Naruto was caught by Jean's raised hands. Naruto charged at the metal figure as Colossus took the kick. He remained motionless. Colossus slid back a few feet due to the force of the kick. Naruto winced in agony as he nearly broke his leg. Naruto gave the order, long-range support. The construction site was awash in red beams as he was struck in the chest. Sabretooth let out a cry. A powerful blow also struck Colossus, sending him crashing into the earth. Rogue said, I found Magneto. He is up on that building. Quicksilver is with him. Naruto received a stern glance. The X-Men started to move, saying, move to Magneto's location. Quicksilver's expression darkened. They found us. Magneto held up his hands and said, no matter, the time for games is over. Below the X-Men, the ground started to tremble. It collapsed, forming a massive sinkhole. Underground establishment, sir. Boris raised his head. The soldier reported, the ground above us collapsed. We have picked up 9 signals, all of them mutant. Boris grinned. Get the sentinel activated. It is time for those mutants to meet their end. As he came out of the wreckage, Naruto moaned. He looked around and rubbed his head. His eyes lit up with relief when he realized the others were all right. He looked up, sensing a plethora of negative emotions on the X-Men. Lights shone down. The mutants were the target of soldiers' weapons. No one move, Storm declared. Like who wants to move? Shadowcat blurted out. Wolverine snarled. Magneto set us up. Boris held up his hand. The soldiers hurried away after saying, holster your weapons and move out. The air was filled with a loud thud. Kushina's eyes narrowed. A big steel door opened and someone asked, are those footsteps? A massive machine entered the room, and the X-Men stared in horror and amazement as it entered the room. It loomed over them. Shadowcat gulped. Guys, like what is that thing? Beast looked amazed. It appears to be a giant robot, but I have never seen anything like it. Nightcrawler said, let's leave this place. Whatever it is, it doesn't appear friendly. Naruto's eyes became stony. Nightcrawler, start. The ground beneath them began to move. Before he could complete the command, they began to fly into the air. Sentinel and the X-Men were raised to the surface. Sentinel gazed at the X-Men below. Panels on the Sentinel opened and read, destroy mutant signatures. Jean, Cyclops, and Storm, don't let those missiles get to the city, said Naruto. Multiple missiles were fired by Sentinel. They dispersed. The X-Men. Cyclops aimed and destroyed 2 missiles with a series of optic blasts. Storm destroyed another by shooting lightning from her hand. Jean was able to collide 2 missiles with one another. Unfortunately, 3 more missiles managed to pass through, causing huge explosions at the construction site. A number of kunai with explosive tags were thrown by Kushina and Naruto unharmed. The kunai bounced off the Sentinel. There were several explosions near the Sentinel. Did it work? Rogue asked uneasily. Shadowcat's gaze grew wide. I don't think so. Sentinel lifted its hands after emerging from the smoke unscathed. There were more weapons. Dozens of lasers were directed at the X-Men. Sentinel started to enter the city. Naruto was told, we have to stop it, protect the civilians. As he moved to face the Sentinel, he was hit by a missile fired by it with wind-natured chakra. He threw a kunai. The missile exploded before its time because the kunai pierced it. Storm flew through the air and struck the Sentinel with multiple lightning bolts, causing minor damage. Cyclops unleashed his strongest beam. It blew off a piece of armor when it hit the Sentinel in the chest. Several seals were slapped onto its legs by Kushina through the Sentinel's legs. Lightning streaks. Nightcrawler, get Rogue to Cyclops. Cyclops, let Rogue drain a bit of your power so we have 2 long-range fighters, Naruto stated. On it, Nightcrawler was struck by a green substance that encircled him and solidified. The same green substance struck both Beast and Wolverine. Jean, get Rogue to Cyclops now. Naruto sprinted ahead. Avoiding the green goo being fired by the sentinel, he formed a Rasengan and ran up the sentinel. He ran up to its face and his eyes took on a hard expression. He shouted, Rasengan, and struck the sentinel in the eye. Its head exploded in a huge explosion. Cyclops and Rogue unleashed 2 full-power optic blasts. The sentinel's chest was ripped open by the combined force of the 2 blasts. Several kunai were thrown into the hole by Kushina. The sentinel was illuminated by a huge bolt of lightning that Storm hurled from her raised hands. When the explosive tags triggered, the robot exploded and Naruto flipped off the sentinel's head. The street was filled with a massive ball of fire. It was visible from a mile away. Naruto saw Shadowcat releasing Beast, Nightcrawler, and Wolverine. Then he turned to see them being filmed by camera crews. The military and police began to arrive. X-Men retreat. Storm, create a fog for us to hide in. Storm held up her hands. The street was soon covered in a thick fog. The army and police looked around, bewildered. The Xavier Institute. The news is dominated by the Sentinel battle. All of the X-Men's full identities and photos had been made public. Naruto sat with his hands in a ram seal on the Institute's roof. He focused intently. The Institute was hidden from view by a huge genjutsu seal. A few inches from the front gates, police cars came to a stop in an attempt to locate the Xavier Institute. The police started searching in confusion to ward off the helicopters. The storm produced a number of thunderclouds and lightning. Genjutsu was ineffective against cameras. Rogue declared, the entire world is now pursuing us. Kitty let out a moan. Like my parents are so going to kill me. In his hand, Logan crushed a can. So what do we do now? Everyone looked at Professor Xavier. Professor Xavier looked thoughtfully. I will take Hank with me to the Pentagon. We need to convince the president that mutants are not a threat. Yeah, you'll have to do it quick before a law is passed to hunt us down, Scott replied. Jean walked out. I am going to check on Naruto. Take a break. Naruto gazed at the scores of police vehicles outside. Police are stationed in front of the mansion. He had hidden a radio up here and listened to it. The entire nation is in a state of panic. Mutants are being discriminated against and expelled worldwide, being persecuted for having no criminal activity other than being born. It's true, Professor Xavier. The world has not yet come to terms with mutants. Sadly, the secret has been revealed. Naruto, the reason we must hide our abilities is because people tend to naturally fear what they do not understand. He gave a stern expression. Naruto balled his fists and said, I'll find a way to make them understand that we are no different from them, I promise it. Juggernaut strolled along the road. The air was filled with sirens. The Juggernaut was surrounded by 6 police cars. Juggernaut smirked as he lifted a car and threw it high into the air, saying, Freeze or we will open fire. Fire. The air was filled with gunshots. Bullets bounced off the Juggernaut without causing any harm. The police were terrified as the Juggernaut went on his rampage. Congressional meeting in Washington. It is clear that these mutants are a threat to society. Look at the destruction they caused, said Senator Ellis. He gestured toward a monitor that displayed the Sentinel battle. Look at the evidence right in front of us. The meeting's doors opened up. Hank McCoy and Professor Xavier came in. Many backed away in terror as they glanced at Hank. Hank winced slightly at the bright lights as the cameras flashed. Senator Ellis demanded, Who are you? Rolling up to the podium was Professor Xavier. I am Professor Charles Xavier. This is my colleague and friend, Hank McCoy. We are mutants. The Xavier Institute. Kushina watched the TV while leaning against the wall. Hank and Professor Xavier had finally made it to the Congress meeting. Every student, even Aurora and Logan, was glued to the television. When she looked around, Jean and Naruto were gone. She would leave Naruto in Jean's care, and a smile came to her face. Jean could manage her son. Room of danger. Ah. Naruto clenched his jaw in concentration. His right hand held a flawless Rasengan. He directed his wind-natured chakra into the rotating ball of chakra while his left hand hovered over the Rasengan. The air was filled with a whistling sound. The wind gathered 4 blades and swirled around the Rasengan. Activate steel wall. A steel wall that was 6 inches thick emerged from the earth. Naruto separated his feet. He stepped forward and dashed toward the wall. Futon Rasengan, Wind Rasengan. He yelled as he pushed the Rasengan against iron. The danger room was filled with an explosion. The destruction of the steel wall caused Naruto to smile. Naruto collapsed to his knees. Gasping for air, he had succeeded a Rasengan that is elemental compared to the standard Rasengan. It is far more powerful. His neck was encircled by 2 arms. He was drawn back into a cozy hug, whispering, That is enough for today, Jean said. Jean put her head against his as she knelt behind him. I can't stop now. Naruto's fists clenched. I have to become stronger. Power alone will not change the world, Jean stated. Naruto looked at the ground and said, I know, it is all I have, Professor Xavier, and you are good with words. I have tried my best to learn how to negotiate and learn to talk to others. That is something reserved for others, so I have to be the person who relies on his power and show others through my actions, not words, that mutants and non-mutants can live in peace. He started to get up. Jean and Naruto got to their feet. He was taken aback when she pulled him into a kiss. You are better with your words than you think. Naruto smiled. I'll be back upstairs shortly. I want to train for a bit more. She nodded. Jean left after they shared a quick kiss. He reached into his pouch. After waiting for her to leave, he had a three-pronged kunai in his hands, the handle of which was wrapped in seal paper. He looked at the kunai, and his eyes took on a determined expression. Washington. The sentinel attacked us. We merely defended ourselves, replied Hank. Senator Ellis's eyes narrowed. How do we know that you didn't build the sentinel? I have reports from police that every attempt to enter the Xavier Institute has failed due to highly advanced technology that is cloaking the school. For all we know, you built the sentinel and lost control of it. Professor Xavier spoke calmly. At the Xavier Institute, Senator Ellis leaned toward his assistant and asked, what is that? His face broke into a grin. The group turned to face the monitor and said, pull it up on the screen. There was a live feed. The juggernaut was seen assaulting a dam. A tank was thrown through the air by Juggernaut. Mutants are not a danger to us? That mutant sure is a danger to the 63,000 people in that town below, said Senator Ellis. Professor Xavier and Hank looked at each other sharply. The Xavier Institute. Kurt moaned. Great, now we'll never be able to leave the mansion. Yeah, like Juggernaut is completing ruining this for us, Kitty replied. Across her chest, Rogue folded her arms. There is no way anyone is going to stop the Juggernaut with the professor in Washington. Naruto came into the living room and said, we'll stop the Juggernaut. He was dressed in new clothes, black ninja sandals, black pants wrapped at the shins, a long-sleeved dark orange shirt, bandages wrapped around his hands, and a long sleeveless black coat with orange flames at the bottom. He sported a high 8 bearing the X-Men emblem. Kushina's gaze expanded behind Naruto. A picture of Minato materialized. Logan let out a grunt. If you go out there, then you'll be attacked like the Juggernaut. It won't matter to anyone that you were trying to help. The professor told us to stay here, Scott remarked. Right now we can't leave or it might make matters worse. Calmly, Naruto stood. I didn't spend all this time training to stand on the sidelines. When trouble goes down, Juggernaut is endangering many lives with his pointless destruction. We have the power to stop that. I don't care if everyone else sees us as freaks or monsters. I know who I am. I am Naruto Namikaze. I am an X-Man and I am going out there to do what I can to help. Jean got to his feet, eyes resolute. I'm coming too. Kurt grinned. Count me in too. Kushina grinned and said, I'll get the jet prepped. Rogue grinned and asked, when did you become good at giving speeches? Scott grinned. X-Men stick together. Guess I am coming as well. Logan grinned and said, I've never been one to turn down on fight. Kitty asked, how are we going to stop the Juggernaut? Naruto smiled and said, well, there is one other person I want to bring along. Take a break. The Juggernaut leapt to the top of the dam. He lifted his fists and struck the dam with them. A large hole was left when the dam broke and collapsed from the opposite side. Water poured out as Juggernaut got ready to do more harm. A smirk came to his face until a red optic beam struck his chest and knocked him back on his ass. Wolverine and Naruto leapt from the X-copter. Jean and Iceman, focus on repairing the dam. Nightcrawler and Shadowcat, when you get an opportunity, go for the helmet. Cyclops, give long-range support and take shots when you get them. Rogue, you stay put until we get that helmet off. Copy. Everyone exclaimed. Juggernaut gave Naruto and Wolverine a scowl. This time my brother isn't here to save you. I'll show you the true power of the Juggernaut. Bring it on, bub. Wolverine snapped when Juggernaut swung his fist. Wolverine rolled beneath it and moved behind him. Naruto rushed ahead. Rasengan. He slammed Juggernaut's chest with a Rasengan. Juggernaut backhanded Naruto away without moving an inch. Juggernaut grabbed Wolverine and slammed him down to the dam after Wolverine leapt on his back after swiftly unlocking a latch and teleporting onto Juggernaut's shoulder. Nightcrawler fled to safety as he lifted his foot to crush Wolverine. Juggernaut was hit in the chest by another optic blast. Cyclops had an unobstructed view of the battle from his position on the opposite side of the dam. Juggernaut was re-engaged by Naruto. Jean flew down right in front of the damaged dam. She pushed the water back to the other side after catching it with her telekinetic abilities. Iceman dashed to the crack's entrance. The water froze as he lifted his hands and spewed a strong ice beam. An extremely thick layer of ice formed when the water solidified. According to Jean, dam has been repaired. On Juggernaut's back, Nightcrawler and Shadowcat teleported before Juggernaut caught them and threw them into Wolverine. The two were able to obtain 2 more latches. Juggernaut shouted, nothing can stop the Juggernaut. I am raw power. Naruto used a flash tag to toss a kunai when Naruto activated the seal. The kunai flew at Juggernaut, 3 inches from his chest. The Juggernaut was blinded by a bright flash channeling chakra to his legs. Naruto charged forward at a high speed by directing his chakra to his feet. He leapt onto the Juggernaut's chest and remained there. He unlocked the final latch with haste. Naruto was grabbed by Juggernaut. Naruto commanded, "Cyclops, do it. Nightcrawler, get Rogue." Before he was slammed into the ground, Naruto was in pain. A strong beam from Cyclops struck Juggernaut in the helmet. After being blasted off, Juggernaut's helmet plummeted into the water below. Jean knocked Juggernaut away from Naruto with her powers behind the Juggernaut. Nightcrawler and Rogue teleported. Rogue jumped onto the Juggernaut's back and used his bare hands to grab his face. Juggernaut cried out in agony. "Ah!" As he sensed his life force and powers being sapped, attempting to pull Rogue away from him, the enormous mutant staggered. Rogue took quite a bit before she collapsed. "Ugh," Rogue said. In a head rub, Juggernaut lifted his fist and growled. Rogue blocked it with a raised hand. He delivered another blow, but she easily picked up the Juggernaut. After knocking it away, Rogue threw him into the air and yelled, "Get out of here!" The Juggernaut was struck by Iceman's intensely cold beam, which turned him into a block of ice below. The icy Juggernaut plunged into the river. Naruto smiled. Mission accomplished. Washington. Ellis, the senator, spluttered, "What just happened? What did they do?" Professor Xavier grinned with pride. Senator Ellis sat down without saying anything more. What they were trained to do. All of the students at the Xavier Institute are trained to use their powers in order to help society, as you witnessed. I believe they did just that. The Xavier Institute, the president told the students and professors, "I would like to officially clear the X-Men of all charges. The true culprit behind the Sentinel attacks is in custody." As he urged Americans to refrain from blaming mutants and discriminating against them. "More has to be discovered about mutants," the president said. The TV was turned off by Professor Xavier. "I am proud of you all. Even though the world is against you, you are the better men and women by going out there despite the hatred and fear. Difficult times are ahead. The secret is out. I wish I could say that everything will be okay, but it won't. Many of you will face difficult decisions ahead as you face adversity and discrimination. I hope you all will never forget who you are. Do not let the opinions and actions of others turn you down a path that you will regret." At the head of the table was Professor Xavier. He thought about what he was going to talk about with the older pupils. Parents had removed a couple of the young students from the institute since the parents only worried about their children's safety. He didn't hold them responsible, but the students who would be struggling the most are the older ones. The students entered the study one by one. Jean inquired curiously, "Why did you call us?" "I have spoken with the school board and they have agreed to let you come back to school for today. Granted, none of you use your powers," Xavier replied. "Today?" Scott asked. "That is right, because tonight a meeting will be held to discuss whether or not you will be allowed to stay at the school. This is very important, so I need you all to refrain from using your powers." Kitty paused. "Professor, I am scared to go back there. We no longer fit in." Xavier smiled slightly. "I know that is why today is so important. We have to show that we are not a threat, that we are no different from the rest of the world. I know what I am asking is steep, but you all will help be a beacon to other mutants. Show the world that we are not the monsters that they see us as." He raised up a piece of paper titled "Monsters Within Us." Hey. Kurt snatched up the stub. "My name isn't listed. I am merely labeled as unidentified." Scott gave a headshake. "It won't take anyone long to make the connection, especially the people that know you live here." Kurt sighed, "But you're right." Naruto got to his feet. "Best get going so we aren't late." Rogue arched an eyebrow. Since when is he so anxious to go to school? Bavel High. Everyone was staring at Naruto, Scott, Jean, Kitty, and Rogue as they approached the school. Despite the glares, the 5 continued to move. "Get out here. Freaks. We don't want you here, monsters." In an attempt to locate Kurt, Kitty turned around. She looked over and saw him standing with some students. Kurt smiled sheepishly as he looked at her. Her eyes flashed with anger. Then she sighed and went to join the others. Take a break. Naruto was seen strolling outside by Duncan. His eyes took on an angry expression. He pointed to his friends. They all 3 dashed ahead of Naruto. Naruto hesitated and arched an eyebrow. Duncan said, "We got unfinished business, freak," and he clenched his teeth. Naruto was punched across the face. "I am going to make you pay for all those times you humiliated me." Naruto smiled. "Kitty hits harder than you." Duncan punched Naruto in the stomach, asking, "What you say?" Naruto stumbled after being struck across the jaw by a right hook. "Come on, freak, use your powers. Think I am scared of you?" "My powers?" Naruto began to chuckle. Duncan and his friends appeared perplexed. "Don't you know what my powers are?" they asked. "Oh, well, I am using them right now. My power is to piss off idiots like you 3. Duncan delivered a few more blows. Naruto took them all without retaliating. "Hey," Kitty and Rogue approached. "If you want to fight." Naruto moved ahead of the pair. Rogue and Kitty gave him a startled look. He spat some blood out. Naruto kept grinning and said, "That last punch almost hurt." Duncan's breath came in sharp gasps. "This isn't over, freak," Duncan said as he turned to go with his friends. Rogue scowled. "Why didn't you fight back? You could have easily taken them all with no powers." Kitty said, "Yeah, like what is going on?" Naruto claimed, "I won't let Duncan or anyone else in this school turn me into someone I am not," as he left two shocked girls in his wake. In his office, Principal Kelly observed the events that transpired. He had hoped Duncan would force that freak to use his abilities. Then, getting those jerks kicked out of school would have been so simple. He had to figure out how to get them kicked out. Mutants pose a threat to the community. "Take a break, Kurt." Amanda rushed to embrace Kurt. "This is so great, now we don't have to hide." Kurt noticed a few pupils walking by. He shoved Amanda around the corner to an empty hallway and said, "Hey, how are all you doing?" "I am doing great over here." Amanda scowled. "Kurt, what is going on?" Kurt released a sigh. "Listen, no one knows I am a mutant. I want to keep it that way. Being normal is the best thing that ever happened to me," Kurt replied. As she gazed at Kurt, Amanda asked, "What about sticking by your friends?" He averted his gaze while wearing a guilty expression. "Take a break." Naruto proceeded down the corridor. He had observed that the Brotherhood had not shown up for class since none of them had participated in the battle against Magneto and the Sentinel. The paper had not declared them mutants. They were using this as a pretext to permanently drop out of school, as if they didn't care. When he saw Jean and Principal Kelly arguing, all thoughts vanished from his mind. Kelly, the principal, had a box full of awards. His eyes were filled with rage as he left. Principal Kelly's negative feelings toward Jean were palpable to Naruto. "Jean," hurried Naruto toward her. Jean's eyes were hurt as she looked at him. He drew her into his embrace. She gave him a tight hug. "It's okay. I never once used my powers to cheat or win a game," Jean replied. "I know, don't let them get to you. The Jean I know is stronger than anyone I know. She doesn't listen to idiots," laughed Naruto. Jean grinned. "Thanks, you're a really good boyfriend." Naruto smiled. She pushed him playfully and rolled her eyes, saying, "Well, I have this really hot girlfriend and I like staring at her without getting slapped." Jean felt a lot better. He always knew how to cheer her up and make her feel better, whether it was through words or actions. Jean noticed that Naruto's left cheek was bruised. "What happened to your face?" she asked. Naruto shrugged and said, "I had a run-in with some idiots. It's no big deal." She recognized the person instantly. Duncan. Since the day they first met, Duncan had detested Naruto and Scott. The fact that Jean ended her relationship with Duncan in order to be with Naruto didn't help either. "Don't worry about it so much. I can handle Duncan. I have faced far worse things." Naruto laughed. Jean grinned. Meeting at school, Jean asked in surprise, "You want me to speak?" Parents and students fill the entire auditorium. She gave Professor Xavier a disbelieving glance. "Yes, Jean, it is important that they hear from all sides. We need the voice of a student up there," stated Professor Xavier. Jean shifted uneasily. Kurt, still in disguise, leaned against the wall and said, "I just wish the others would get here." Parents turned to watch Kitty and Scott enter the auditorium as the doors opened. As Kitty sat down next to Scott, who sat down next to Professor Xavier, she paid no attention to Kurt. Jean narrowed her eyes and asked, "Scott, where is Naruto?" Naruto had informed her of his impending arrival. Scott swallowed. Professor Xavier extended his mind and said, "He had something to take care of. I wanted to help him, but he insisted that he could handle it." Jean followed suit in the parking lot. They both felt Naruto. There were others out there besides Naruto. Jean gasped and started to get to her feet. "Jean, leave him be." But Professor Xavier gave a headshake. "This is something he needs to do on his own." After school, Naruto was knocked down by a powerful blow, and Rogue flinched. She observed Duncan being beaten by his friends. She stepped forward, a hard look coming into her eyes. Suddenly a hand seized her shoulder as Kushina stood behind Rogue, holding her back. Her eyes widened. Kushina's hands clenched until they were dripping blood. Scott, Kitty, Rogue, and Naruto made their way to the auditorium. When the four arrived at the stairs, there was a screech. Duncan and three other jocks emerged from the passenger side of a truck as it pulled up. "I told you we would finish this later," Duncan said, giving Naruto a fierce look. "Just you and me. Your other freak friends can go." "Okay," said Naruto as he moved forward. Scott moved forward. "The rest of you go inside. I'll handle this." Scott scowled. "Naruto." His face lit up with a smile. Naruto gestured. Scott nodded and grudgingly got to his feet, saying, "I got this. Shades, go inside." Scott said, "Let's go, Kitty, Rogue," and went inside. Kitty followed Scott inside while biting her lip. Naruto gave Rogue a quick look. "You should go too." Rogue frowned. "I am going to stay right here. I'd rather be out here kicking their asses than inside." Naruto's eyes hardened as he said, "Rogue, I don't want you helping at all." Fear sent a chill down Rogue's spine with his typical fox-like grin. He turned to face Duncan and said, "I'll never forgive you if you interfere. I hope you've been hitting the gym. Last time we fought you were hitting like a little schoolgirl." Anger filled Duncan's eyes. Naruto was punched in the face. Both Duncan and his companions were panting heavily, spitting blood. Naruto got to his feet. He had a busted lip and a few bruises on his ribs. Without a doubt, he would get a black eye tomorrow. He wiped the blood from his mouth with the back of his hand. He straightened and grinned. Naruto said, "This is almost fun," and he laughed. Rogue looked at Kushina and said, I don't understand this at all. Instead, why isn't he fighting back?" Kushina gave a pitiful smile. "He can't. What is that supposed to mean?" Without raising an eyebrow, Kushina watched as her son was thrashed and said, "This isn't about him anymore. Naruto won't fight back because if he does it could affect the way mutants are treated all over the world. Even if he doesn't use his powers, no one will see that. All they will see is a mutant beating up on others. His dream is be the hero, the one who creates peace among mutants and non-mutants, so he is taking this beating in order to show the world that mutants are not the violent ones." Rogue saw Naruto fall to his knees after receiving a kick to the stomach. Naruto gripped his abdomen to stop the tears from streaming down her face. She closed her eyes. "It isn't right," Kushina declared, grabbing Rogue to stop her from getting involved. Duncan gasped, "Fight back." Naruto smiled as he watched the scene play out. He cast a sidelong glance at the parents and students who had arrived late for the meeting and said, "Why, I'm winning." He turned back to face Duncan and his friends. "Let's call it a draw and we both go our separate ways. I will beat you until you plead for forgiveness." Duncan rushed forward and struck Naruto with a feeble blow. Naruto's head swiveled sideways. Naruto stumbled back 2 steps after taking a second punch. "Hey Duncan. We need to get out of here." Duncan turned to see people observing. He jumped back into the truck after clenching his fists after loading up. The others quickly drove away. Rogue hurried to join Naruto. "Are you okay?" Naruto spit blood out of his mouth. "Yeah, I am fine," Naruto said with a grin that was bloody. Rogue's eyes widened when he realized that his earlier remark wasn't just about her. "Thanks for not interfering, Mom." Kushina gave her son a hand up. "You're as reckless as your father." "Thank you," Naruto said with a laugh before flinching in agony. Rogue took hold of the other arm. "Let's get you to a hospital." He shook his head, saying, "No, we have to be there at the meeting. I don't care how I look, this is more important than me." Naruto replied. He was grudgingly assisted into the meeting by Rogue and Kushina. Jean had just been called up to speak. Jean's eyes widened in horror as she saw Naruto. He smiled. "Talk. I'm all right. I am not as important as this." Jean bit her lip. "All right." She turned to face the crowd and began to speak from the heart. The following day in the study, the X-Men gathered hard-eyed. Professor Xavier sat at the head of the table. Jean gave Rogue a quick look as she sat on either side of Naruto. Jean's eyes narrowed, and Rogue smirked slightly, not knowing what the school board had decided. Naruto stayed in the dark. "The school board contacted me with its final decision," stated Xavier. Kitty let out a sigh. "Just give us the bad news." Xavier grinned. "The board has decided to let you all come back to school." "After what happened, I'm not sure I want to," stated Scott. The sincerity of Jean's speech and Naruto's refusal to fight back showed all those there last night that mutants are just regular people wanting to live life as peaceful as everyone else. It may not seem like a big deal, but you all are now a beacon to all other mutants to come in the future, a symbol of hope. It is not only a big responsibility, it is a great honor," stated Xavier. Naruto let out a moan. Everyone laughed when they said, "Now school really has become important." Gazing at the summoning scroll, Naruto looks at it as a unique scroll that, when opened, can call forth a person or object. The scroll has a unique kind of seal drawn on it. He understands how to make the seal. Although the seal's basic idea is straightforward, he was unable to duplicate his father's jutsu's effects with it to create such a potent seal that could instantly move a person from one place to another. His father must have been a genius. It is the most intricate seal he has ever seen. Naruto lets out a sigh, then folds his legs and shuts his eyes. He starts to meditate. His body and mind are calmed when he meditates, although Naruto detests acknowledging it. Master Akisame is correct that meditation is a very practical skill. He misses his master a lot. Naruto lets out a groan. 2 days prior, he had visited the dojo. He had only discovered a vacant space with a letter on a mat. "Greetings, my stupid pupil. I've made the decision to go back to Japan. I'm sure you'll be able to finish your training on your own. Even though you still have a lot to learn, you are, without a doubt, the worst pupil I have ever had. Yane." Naruto looks irritated and says, "I hate that man. He plans to kick Master Akisame's ass one day." He laughs as he imagines his sensei hitting him for being distracted. Naruto calms down. It takes him a few seconds to enter a moderate state of meditation. He experiences an odd sensation. He begins to sense energy in the air, which he interprets as chakra. He tries to channel the energy, and a golden aura begins to surround him. He feels an amazing surge of power, and he smiles because he intends to master this new ability. School. When Kitty said, "I am so getting tired of those looks." Rogue frowned and said, "There is nothing we can do. We are unable to use our powers," the professor said. The air is filled with screams, and when Kitty and Rogue turn around, they see multiple lockers explode and water pouring out, soaking 10 students. The two girls start laughing and say, "Perhaps it isn't so horrible after all." With his recent pranking, Naruto has been making things equal. Kitty grinned. Principal Kelly has been trying to catch Naruto in the act for a year, but neither Naruto nor Kurt have ever been apprehended, and there is never any evidence that links the two. Definitely, Rogue grinned. Take a break. Kurt closes his locker and looks to his right, where a couple of children are giving him shady looks. It seems as though the image inducer isn't even working, and he feels like a freak and an outsider once more. Kurt. Amada approaches him. Kurt says, "Hey Amanda." With a phony smile, Amanda gives his hand a light squeeze and says, "Don't let it affect you. What they think is irrelevant." "I know, but still," Kurt exclaims, "I finally fit in for the first time and now I am back to being a monster." "A monster is not you and you still have your friends. I'm still with you. Isn't that sufficient?" "I hope it's enough," said Amanda. Kurt nods feebly, and she frowns to herself. Take a break. Scott was sitting by himself at the lunch table when he looked over at Naruto and Jean. He had a jealous look in his eyes, which was quickly followed by a guilty one, and he was genuinely happy for them. Naruto and Jean are his best friends, and they had been close since they were young. Naruto was the first person to whom Jean really opened up to him. He had always known that Jean had a crush on Naruto, and it had been wishful thinking that she would begin to see him as more than just a friend. "Is it okay if I sit here?" Rogue pointed to Naruto and Jean's table and said, "It is a bit crowded over there." "Sure." Scott grinned. "I feel like there is no point in me finally being able to control my powers," Rogue says as she sits down. "Everyone avoids us now, even though I can now get close to them." "Tell me about it," Scott says with a regretful smirk. "I'm beginning to believe that Kushina's attempt to create a seal to help control my powers is pointless." "That sounds awesome. I've always been curious about the color of your eyes," Rogue said, blushing slightly. Scott laughed and Rogue giggled a little. "Tell the truth, I don't even remember," Scott said. Jean and Naruto look at Scott and Rogue, and as they exchange glances and hear their animated conversation, a plan begins to take shape in their minds. Take a break. With the secret out, mutants must now openly use their powers to defend themselves against persecutors, and other mutants are using their powers to fight back. Professor Xavier uses Cerebro to discover that more and more mutants are becoming active worldwide. Magneto had been right when he said that war was imminent, and Xavier is certain that if people don't change their perspectives, the conflict between mutants and non-mutants will turn into a full-scale conflict, which is why the X-Men are needed to demonstrate to the world that, despite their special abilities, mutants are just like everyone else and want to live normal lives. "Do you think I'm doing the right thing, Kushina?" Xavier inquired. Kushina emerges from the shadows and says, "I will stand by your side as I have been doing, right or wrong." To Naruto, "You have been like a grandfather, and to me, you have been a wonderful friend. I'll be there for you through everything that lies ahead," she grinned. Then Xavier laughed and said, "That isn't what I asked." Minato always sought tranquility. To be honest, he detested being a ninja. "I was taken aback when he said that he enjoyed spending time with his friends, training, and going on missions. However, he disliked that being a ninja automatically made him a warrior who had to eliminate his village's enemies." Minato was constantly trying to figure out how to make the world a more peaceful place. He had to make choices he never enjoyed when he was appointed Hokage. For the sake of his village, he had the strength to make such choices without losing himself, which is why I loved him so much. Even though it hurt to watch him do it, it eventually got to the point where, as soon as he made a decision, he would immediately consider another that might keep him from making the same choice again. Kushina grinned and said, "That's exactly what you do, and that's why we all follow you. Even if you make a bad choice, I know you'll figure it out the next time." Xavier grinned appreciatively and Kushina winked. "I don't know what I would do without you by my side," he said. Take a break. After entering his room, Naruto throws his bag aside and collapses onto the bed, frowning as he feels something beneath his back. He sits up and turns to find a book on his bed, but it doesn't appear to be a schoolbook, and he didn't have any books of his own because he despises reading. "Jiraiya's the tale of the utterly gutsy ninja Jiraiya? Isn't that my godfather's name? Mom must have left this for me," Naruto says, scratching the back of his head. He flips the book open and starts reading. Pietro grins and says, "Mess with me and you mess with my father." Lance lifts his fist and says, "Whoa, better think about that." "Petro, what are you doing here?" Toad as Toad Fred cracks his knuckles. Lance glared. "I came to whip you all back into shape," Pietro says with a sly smile. "Until the X-Men are dealt with, we will not rest forever." Take a break. Kushina is looking for a good place to shop in the mall, but she really needs to find a good weapons store that sells swords, kunai, shuriken, and other useful items. Not those stupid guns. Although guns are undoubtedly dangerous weapons, she has never fallen in love with them and much prefers the feel of cold steel in her hands. She looks up at the second floor after catching the Queen of Hearts card that is floating down from above. Gambit waves from the railing and blows a kiss at Kushina, who begins to leave with a charming smile on his face. Kushina smirks as she would like to kick his ass because it has been too long since she gave him a good ass kick. Room of danger. A blush heats Jean's cheeks as she recalls Naruto talking her into that public display. Jean is not the adventurous type and doesn't really like making a public show of her feelings, but Naruto is different. He always wants to show his feeling for her. Naruto tries to ignore the tingling sensation in his mind, but Jean begins to relive his most recent memory. The two of them making out behind the gym during lunch. "Oh, that didn't work any better," Naruto moans. "I don't get it. My mutation involves psionic abilities. According to the elderly man, since telepathy is a psychic ability, why am I unable to combat it?" "It's not the same. You can sense other people's life force thanks to your psychic abilities. You seem to have a connection to nature," Jean remarked. "Then what about my ability to sense negative emotions?" asks Naruto, folding his arms. "Telepathy of some kind must be involved." Jean thinks for a moment. "It is feasible. You can sense my mental probes now, don't you?" "Well, none of the others can." Naruto nods. "Since only other telepaths can detect telepathy, that is a significant advancement. Stop expecting to learn it right away." She smiles. "I think in time you will be able to block me." As he collapses onto his back, he moans, "I understand, as always, you were right," she says with a smile as she lies down beside him, and they both look up at the ceiling. "I just don't want to be used against my friends again," she says, "or anybody else." Really, Naruto has an angry expression on his face. "I didn't train so hard to be used by others." "It'll be all right," Jean says, leaning over to kiss his cheek before getting up and holding out her hand. He grinned as he took her hand and she helped him up, saying, "We'll keep practicing until you get it." "Yes." Naruto smiled. Bavel Gambit spins his staff, deflecting 4 shuriken, and he pants heavily as Kushina, twirling a kunai, approaches him on the mall roof. "I wish you would stop running," she says with a wild look in her eyes and a smirk. "This is really ruining the fun." Kushina grinned. "You be a feisty one, Red. I like that," Gambit grinned. Rolling her eyes, Kushina holsters her kunai and says, "I wish I could say the same, but you're not even in the same class as Minato. Go away before I end up hurting you." Gambit grinned and said, "I have a message for you from Magneto. There will be a place for you all at his side when you get tired of playing hero," he says. Kushina waves as she is leaving. "Tell Magneto I said bite me," she says. Unknown place. The X-Men had performed flawlessly, revealing all their powers and identities to fight the Sentinel, and Magneto sat contemplating his next move. He had used that idiot Boris Ikonov to reveal the presence of mutants, and as he had predicted, the world immediately turned against them. Mutants are being persecuted all over the world, and the war has officially begun. Xavier has succeeded in garnering some support for mutants. Magneto frowns as his longtime friend continues to hold out hope that a peaceful resolution can be reached. He approaches the monitor and displays the image of Kushina Namikaze and Naruto Namikaze, a mother and son pair of mutants. Magneto wonders where Charles had met the two, who have amazing powers that include super speed, enhanced strength, enhanced senses, enhanced stamina, enhanced endurance, energy manipulation, elemental manipulation, and minor psionic abilities. He will be closely monitoring the Namikaze family. He rarely encounters a mutant with so many abilities, especially rare ones like the two possess. POW R8 Ryan, a security guard at the POW 8 factory, walks around the area to make sure everything is clear. He doesn't really like the new sports drink, but he has to do his job. He's heard that saboteurs have been attacking the factory lately, so if any of those punks show up tonight, they will be the ones who get the end of his taser, which he has been wanting to use on a live target for a while. "Good work, Sybil," said a hard feminine voice as the security guard turned the corner, and a moment later the wall on the far side of the room melted as if it had been burned by acid. A pretty 15-year-old girl with short pink hair, a tight sleeveless light green top that exposed a flat stomach, and tight black latex pants with matching boots entered the factory. Her eyes were cold crimson. "Remember why we are here?" Mesmero, wearing a black top, faded brown pants, and black combat boots, the tall woman with shoulder-length black hair and a lithe build, said. It is to destroy the factory, not to fight the humans. She had a black eye patch over her left eye. With a frown, Mesmero says, I know why we are here, Callisto. She swings her arm and shoots multiple bone spikes, shattering 3 cameras. Let's go. Calmly, Callisto looks at Mesmero and points to the others. POW R8 skate competition. What made us decide to do this? Rogue said. Shaking his head, Scott said, I don't know, come on. Naruto smiled, it will be enjoyable observing the competition while hanging out. I think Riley prevails. He's got some crazy skills, Bobby remarked. Scott nods in agreement as Rogue rolls her eyes and says, I don't even like skateboarding. The 4 of them find seats and settle in, while Naruto swiftly purchased 4 bags of popcorn from a vendor. Rogue has a bored expression on her face as the tournament, which features amateur skaters ranging in age from 15 to adulthood, gets underway. Naruto and Bobby applaud when the skaters execute difficult tricks, and Scott claps courteously. The action soon pauses to allow the spectators to use the restroom and the skaters to rest. I'm thirsty, does anyone want a drink? As Naruto stood up, he asked. Water, Rogue and Scott said simultaneously, and both of them turned away in embarrassment. Naruto grinned to himself as his scheme came together. Get me a lemonade, Bobby said. A woman bumps into Naruto and knocks the POW 8 drink out of his hands as he is about to drink it. Don't drink it, she whispers. Naruto waves as he leaves to get the drinks, yawns as he waits in line, and eventually reaches the front and orders the drinks. Might as well give it a try since it is the sponsor of the tournament, he says. What? He is thirsty and needs a drink, so Naruto complains as he looks down at his spilled drink. Even though he could swear he heard her say something, he must now wait in line to get another one. Callisto looks back to make sure the boy hasn't had any POW 8, and her eyes enlarge when she witnesses him getting another drink. No? Naruto opens the drink's lid and takes a big gulp. Naruto shrugs and says, it isn't. He feels sick, clutches his stomach in agony, and staggers forward. Oh. The chakra is so strong that it briefly becomes visible to the naked eye before exploding off Naruto and blasting multiple people away. Mutant. Take off. Callisto rushes over to Naruto as he falls to his knees. Naruto pants heavily because the pain is becoming unbearable. His vision starts to swim and darkness soon envelops him. Scott, Rogue, and Bobby exchange glances before the 3 swiftly flee the stands. Naruto. Scott reaches for his visors, but the crowd is too crowded. I can't get a clear shot. Bobby swore as Kushina always tells them to look underneath. Rogue looks down at the spilled drink with a curious expression in her eyes. Did Naruto lose control because of the POW 8 drink? We got to contact the professor, Scott said. Beyond the sewers. He cannot stay here, Mesmero says, walking toward her with enraged eyes as Callisto looks down at the mutant child. He is an outsider, a member of the X-Men. Every one of us is a sibling until he recovers from the poison. He must remain here, Callisto responds. Slowly opening his eyes, Naruto groans and looks up at an unfamiliar ceiling. He turns his head to see 2 women staring at him, and a lizard approaches him and places a washcloth on his forehead. Where am I? In a menacing gesture, Mesmero lifts her hand and a bone with a very sharp tip slowly protrudes from her palm. You are with the Morlocks. The Xavier Institute Professor Xavier looks at the 2 vials. One is normal, but the other has turned purple, which indicates that something is wrong. What's going on, Professor? What did you discover? Concerned, Jean asks. It appears that mutants are poisoned by POW 8. The drink is extremely toxic if any of us drink it, but it has no effect on non-mutants, Professor Xavier stated. There is no question that this is what led to Naruto losing control of his abilities. Jean's eyes grew irate. We must locate him. After that, we must close that business. Jean, please don't panic as we speak. Kushina and Wolverine are out looking for Naruto. They'll locate him, Xavier assured them. Jean said, I am going out to look as well, and she hurried out of the room. Morlocks. As Naruto strolls through the sewers, he notices that there is a terrible stench. Dirt is all over the place, and that there are small, shabby tents where mutants reside. His eyes widen in horror when he sees that there are about a dozen sick mutants lying on makeshift blankets, and that people are dying right in front of him. What's wrong? Do you have an issue with our house? Not everyone gets to spend it at a nice mansion. Mesmero frowns as she leans against the wall with her arms folded across her chest. How come everyone is down here? Naruto inquired. The girl approaches with a look of hatred in her eyes, and Mesmero narrows her eyes. Do you think we live here by choice? The world despises us, so we are compelled to come down here. Pretty boy, we can't blend in because of our mutations. We mutants thrive on scraps. She pushes past Naruto, saying, the strong live, the weak perish. Naruto sits on the floor and lowers his head until his bangs cover his eyes as he looks down at the ground. Our world is not your world. He says, I am aware of your activities up there, Mero, and the other Morlocks perform similarly. Callisto stands in front of Naruto and says, we know you do it for all mutants, so we appreciate it. Isn't your world different from ours? Callisto is shocked by the unadulterated rage and rage as Naruto looks up at her. Our worlds are the same. Since we are all the same, we should all be entitled to the same things. He hangs his head in shame and guilt, saying, this isn't right. At least he can still walk around and eat 3 meals a day. But the people down here don't even have an education. He looks at a young girl with long gorilla arms who will never be able to go to a playground or park because she is a freak. A monster all the while. There are dozens of mutants living in the sewers. Right beneath his feet he lives in a mansion with everything he wants. While these mutants are fighting for their lives every day, what is he doing that is helping them? I wish that were true. Callisto says with a sorrowful smile, we only made our presence known because POW 8 has been contaminating our water sources. That drink contains a substance that poisons mutants. If we can't stop them, then we will all die. As Callisto passed him, Naruto remained silent and quickly balled his fists. The sewers smelling the air, Wolverine says, I got his scent. In which direction? Kushina walks next to Wolverine. She reaches into her punch and draws a kunai, thrusting it backwards. Her eyes glances to the wall where a gray-skinned mutant with his body sticking halfway out the wall freezes with a kunai an inch from his throat. I wouldn't recommend it. I am not feeling well. Wolverine's claws exploded out of his hands, and he said, we got company. He turned to face the other mutants who were approaching them. I am trying to find my son, Kushina says, squinting her eyes. Tell me his location. Might want to do as she says, grins Wolverine. Do not harm them. Professor Xavier's voice fills Kushina and Wolverine's head. Jean has found Naruto and is heading to him now. Naruto is fine. The Morlocks took care of him. You looked after my son, Kushina said, putting away her kunai. I'm satisfied with that. I'll wait for him. She turns and heads out, and Wolverine waves lightly before retracting his claws and heading out as well. Take a break. The 5 emerge from the sewers behind the factory, and Mero, Callisto, Sybil, and 2 other Morlocks head towards the POW 8 factory, intending to destroy the entire establishment, this time beyond repair. Callisto stops them in their tracks by raising her hand, saying, I can see in the dark. You're here, but why? Callisto said. With a stern expression on his face, Naruto emerges from the shadows, his coat billowing in the slight wind behind him. I can't let you do it. Our people are being killed by that drink. Get out of the way, or I'll show you why we're called demons. Mero advances as bone spikes protrude from every part of her body. I refuse to allow the Morlocks to turn into criminals. This issue can be resolved in other ways. You are only harming the cause of allowing mutants and non-mutants to live in harmony by turning into criminals, Naruto responds. Anger flares in Mero's eyes. So you would have us die? Naruto's eyes are serene and full of conviction. Callisto has never seen eyes like these. Rather to die as humans than as monsters, he says. Remember those words while I murder you. The calm expression in his eyes never wavers as Mero yells in rage before she swings her bone swords in a wild fury. Mero runs forward at impressive speeds and creates a pair of bone swords. Naruto leans back to avoid the first slash and then steps to the side to avoid the second. Perish. Naruto lands a safe distance away as Mero thrusts her swords forward, striking the air. She pants a lot. This fight is over, and Callisto raises her arms to keep the others from joining in. Mero always relies on her abilities to overwhelm any opponent she encounters. But that won't help him because he has complete control over his powers and has fought in innumerable battles. It's like watching a little child attempt to defeat an adult. None of them have a chance. He takes a step to the side and lets the bone spears fly harmlessly past him. And I won't let you reduce yourself to that of a common criminal. Naruto sighs. I am not going to fight you. Mero raises her hands and fires a pair of bone spears from her palms. The Morlocks don't need any more troubles. They already have enough. Mero squats down and asks, are you aware of our issues? We are incomprehensible to someone from the outside world. The Morlocks watch in shock and wonder as Naruto creates a hand seal and says, then I will learn. The factory behind him erupts, with several explosions coming from inside. I will carry the same hatred and prejudice as the Morlocks. Naruto says, if necessary, I will bear the hatred of the entire world, and I will triumph over it. Put your faith in me, and I'll demonstrate to you that there are better ways for us to live than this, Naruto says, pointing to the demolished factory. Callisto smiles and says, you'd turn into a global criminal just to assist us? As he hears sirens, Naruto smiles and says, I'll become famous or infamous worldwide to show everyone that mutants are no different from the rest of the world. Get out of here. He says I must ensure that my calling card is left behind. I don't want any problems for the Morlocks. Callisto puts a hand on Mero's shoulder, but she shrugs it off and walks away furiously. Naruto and Callisto look at one another, and Callisto nods before he sees her go off with her brethren. When the police arrive, they discover a destroyed factory with no culprits in sight. Just a note pinned to a piece of debris. Jean lands next to Naruto, reaches over and interlaces her fingers with his, and he squeezes her hand. I apologize. Room of danger. The others have already arrived, so Wolverine waits impatiently for Naruto to arrive. Naruto rushes into the room and says, I apologize for being late. He follows the others as they run up. First to notice it, Cyclops asks, what's that symbol on the back of your coat? Kushina narrows her eyes as she stares at the red symbol, which appears to have been written in blood. Knowing what it means, the others look at it. I finally came up with a good code name. Naruto smiled. Call me Akuma. Akuma? Nightcrawler's head tilts. Is there any significance to that? Shadowcat said, perplexed. Smiling, Iceman says, sounds cool. Demon. Is that your code name? Wolverine raised an eyebrow in response. Yep. Naruto smiles. Until the day that mutants are no longer viewed as monsters, I will continue to wear this symbol that some of us can blend in while others cannot. Is unfair. I will therefore no longer hide proud and mutant. Rogue smirks slightly as she shakes her head and says, I swear you get weirder every day. Only you can wear the name of demon. No one else could bear such a burden, Jean says with a smile. He's getting more and more like you every day, Minato. Kushina smiles, taking on the hatred of the world, huh? Kushina smiles proudly as she watches Naruto sneak out of the institute, which he has been doing at night for the entire week since he took on the codename Akuma. He has been spending a lot of time with those mutants who are unable to stay at the institute. Perhaps she is being a little biased, but she knows that one day he will change the world. Take a break. Opening 3 storage scrolls, Naruto sees huge piles of food appear in 3 identical clouds of smoke. The Morlocks rush forward to take the food, and Naruto smiles as he sees the joy and happiness in the Morlocks' eyes. This makes him feel as though he is doing the right thing. Callista smiles a little as she observes Naruto has been coming here nearly every day for the past week, bringing food, first aid supplies, blankets, mattresses, and other items with him. The Morlocks are beginning to view Naruto as a savior because he provides them with necessities for survival. Mesmero frowned and said, I get sick of him and his sympathy. Callisto shakes her head and says, it isn't pity. He is providing for our needs so that we don't turn to crime. He uses this to demonstrate to us that we are all fighting for the same objectives and that cooperation is necessary to achieve them. With narrowed eyes, Mesmero says, it sounds like you like having him around. Turning to face Mesmero, Callisto asks, what if I do? Mesmero whirled around and disappeared into the tunnels as the 2 women gazed at one another. Mesmero, don't do anything stupid, Callisto said, squinting her eyes. School Jean grinned and said, I think the plan is working. Leaning back against the locker next to Jean, Naruto looks at Scott and Rogue as they converse, with Scott even being kind enough to hold Rogue's books for her. As the 2 grow closer, they exchange a triumphant glance. I do so love when a plan falls together, Naruto smiled. Jean rolls her eyes. Also, would you mind telling me where you frequently sneak away to at night? Well, Naruto furrows his brow. Avoid being foolish. You and I share a psychic connection. I can feel when you leave the mansion at night. Jean leans her head next to his. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. After all the training he had done with Jean, he smiles and says, it's true. The 2 of them have developed a psychic bond, which Naruto pouts at because he can never keep anything from her anymore, even though Jean says it has always been there and she only recently realized it. I swear to tell you later, Naruto says with a smile. She sighs, but nods in understanding. I heard Pietro has returned to the Brotherhood. Jean is reassured by the fact that Naruto will eventually tell her, even though she knows he broke a promise. Naruto changed the subject and said, I wonder why he isn't by his father's side anymore. Jean looks worried. I'm worried about it. Pietro, Wanda, Fred, and Lance are strong. Magneto can do a lot of harm because he already has a number of other mutants working for him and the Brotherhood. Wanda, it reminds me that I should talk to her. I haven't seen her in a long time, Naruto remarked. What makes you need to talk to her? Jean's eyes narrowed. Naruto smiles sheepishly and says, just to make sure she is okay. Jean sighs as Naruto takes a slow step back and then runs down the hallway. Bridge in Babel. Pietro has the superpowers of a coward, which is quite appropriate given that he is a huge coward who works for that monster. Wanda looks out the window as she rides in a taxi on her way to New York City. The last time she saw her brother, he had been traveling in that direction. Her thoughts are interrupted by an explosion. Wanda opens the door and steps out onto the bridge, Where a bright fire burns at the top, she narrows her eyes as the fire transforms into 4 horses, which crash into cars on the bridge and cause them to explode. "I'll use him to tell me where Magneto is," Wanda says, raising her hands. Identifying Pyro as one of her father's puppets, blue magic erupts from her hands. As he aims his fire horses at multiple individuals, Pyro chuckles and says, "Ha ha ha." Blue magic strikes him, causing him to lose control of his abilities. He stumbles backwards and falls, and Wanda curses as he breaks free. Pyro catches a railing and slides down, raising his arms, and twin streams of fire shoot towards Wanda. Ah! Wanda barely avoids it, but the exploding flames strike the taxi she is standing next to, sending her flying backwards over the bridge's edge. She reaches out and grabs the edge with one hand, but she gasps as she loses her hold, and a hand grabs her wrist. "Got you," Naruto said with ease as he raised her. "I can't let him escape." Pyro glares at Storm as he flies over the bridge as the skies above darken and start to rain heavily a few seconds later. Wanda ran after Pyro. Pyro already has a huge head start. Wanda was lifted by a pair of arms in a bridal style, and as Naruto leaps from car to car without losing speed. As if she were as light as a feather, her eyes enlarge. "Hold on," Naruto smiled, and Wanda blushed. "Mount Arrowhead. Why are we pursuing him once more?" Naruto inquired. Wanda looks at Naruto and says, "I don't need your assistance, I'm capable of managing this alone." Raising an eyebrow, Naruto says, "That doesn't answer my question." The two are walking up the mountainside when there is a pause. Pyro has taken a ride from the city to Mount Arrowhead, which is a well-known ski resort outside of Bayville. Naruto has carried Wanda all the way to the mountain, and the two are now approaching the ski resort. "I am going to find my father and make him pay for what he did to me," Wanda replied. "Dad? Magneto, you're right," Naruto remarked. "I recall that he was the one who committed you to that mental institution." "Yes," Wanda clenches her hands into fists and says, "I plan to thank him." Naruto notices that Wanda's eyes are filled with the same anger and hatred that Mero's are, and he understands why both girls are so angry. Well, that's a little presumptuous, but he also knows that such anger and hatred are bad and that nothing positive will come of them. Carrying such anger and hatred will lead to Wanda and Mero destroying themselves. "This is where you leave," Wanda and Naruto say as they purchase a pair of snowboards at the ski resort that appears up ahead. "I'm going to work alone," Wanda declared. "I don't think so," Naruto replied, adding, "I didn't come here to be abandoned. In addition, you will require my assistance." "I don't need anyone's help." Wanda glares at Naruto, who narrows his eyes and stares directly into her face. Naruto is always so joyful and carefree that she takes a step back in fear. "Yes, you do," she says. "Among the strongest mutants on the planet is Magneto. He is accompanied by extremely powerful mutants. Although Magneto has had decades to perfect his abilities, I am aware that you have been putting a lot of effort into controlling yours," Naruto remarked. "You need all the assistance you can get." Wanda huffs and crosses her arms over her chest, saying, "All right, please don't obstruct me." Naruto smiled. "That's correct. Is he mentally okay?" Wanda asks, curious about his rapid mood swings. "Found him," Naruto said, gazing at Pyro as he climbed onto the ski lift. Wanda hurriedly shoved the next immigrant into the lift, and Naruto hopped into the lift beside her. "So, what should we do if Magneto is discovered?" Naruto inquired. When asked, "I make him pay," Wanda replied. "All right, everything he did will disappear if you make him pay, correct?" Naruto said. "Stop talking, you don't have to try to be Xavier for me. Help me or get out of here," Wanda yelled. Naruto grinned and said, "Aren't I here? I like the all red," he says, looking Wanda up and down. "It's nice," Wanda says, stifling her blush as Naruto's eyes light up with victory. Pyro exits the elevator and starts snowboarding off, and both Wanda and Naruto follow him. Naruto does a 360-degree jump and gives Wanda a quick wink, which causes the girl to smile. A huge stadium shaped like a metal dome appears in the distance, and Pyro vanishes inside it. "Wow, how has no one noticed this?" Naruto whistled. "He's present, I am aware of it," Wanda said. A basketball-sized metal sphere flies in front of the two, and before it opens up a panel releasing green knockout gas. Naruto grabs Wanda and leaps back. He then throws a kunai with his arm, striking the sphere, which explodes. "Thanks," Wanda said. "Come on, let's go see your dad," Naruto said with a grin. "I am looking forward to round 3 with him." "Round 3? Wanda's eyebrow went up. "Yep." Naruto holds up one finger. "I met him on Asteroid M the first time, and then again during Christmas when I traveled to New York with Rogue. This will be the third one." Wanda remains silent as the two arrive at the exterior of the metal dome. In a matter of minutes, Naruto lifts his hand and knocks on it, then turns to face Wanda, who gives him a stern look for his lack of intelligence. "Hey Buckethead. Please open up," Naruto says, cups his hands over his mouth to project his voice. "I'll have to launch my explosive kunai into the air if you don't open the doors. How much attention that will garner is a mystery." "There is no." Naruto gives her a victory sign, and Wanda's eyes enlarge as the steel opens up into a doorway. "Take a break." Magneto gazes at the monitor. Pyro followed instructions and led the girl directly to him. His plan is proceeding as it should. But one of the X-Men has appeared. It's not just any brat, though. It's Charles's protege, Naruto Namikaze. That youngster has the ability to thwart his plans. So Magneto reasoned that perhaps now would be the best time to deal with them both. "Take care of our visitors, Gambit, Pyro, and Colossus," Magneto commanded. "I want them captured alive." Pyro grinned and said, "At last, some fun." Colossus stays silent while Gambit shuffles a deck of cards, and the three depart to attend to the guests. An older man with black eyes, a long buttoned brown coat, and shaggy brown hair entered the room as Magneto raised his hand to open a steel door and said, "Mastermind, it seems you will have two minds to alter." "Take a break. Are you prepared?" Naruto inquired. Wanda smirked and said, "I have been waiting for this moment for a long time." "Really?" Naruto asks, scratching the back of his head. "You've had a long-standing desire to battle those two?" Gambit and Colossus approach the two as Wanda raises her hands to fire a stream of blue magic that can cancel out mutant powers. Gambit easily dodges it and swings his arm, tossing 4 cards. Naruto throws 4 shuriken, slicing through the cards and causing them to explode prematurely. "I thought you were after Magneto," he says, pointing down the wide hallway. Wanda shoots her blue magic at Colossus, who dodges quickly, and her eyes light up with annoyance. "Oh." Wanda thrust her hands forward, using her magic to strike Colossus, who was blasted backwards into the wall because his feet were magnetized to the ground, preventing him from moving. Gambit spins his staff. "You're the red-haired beauty's son?" Naruto Namikaze. Remember the name. Naruto is launching a barrage of punches and kicks. Gambit tries to keep up with them all, but he falters backwards a step after being kicked in the stomach. He then uses his staff to jump over a leg sweep and land behind Naruto. Naruto raises his arm to block the staff, and Gambit smirks as he throws a charged card, which explodes in Naruto's back. When the smoke clears to reveal a demolished log, Gambit is perplexed. Naruto descends from the ceiling and spins Gambit's jaw. "I got to say, the whole throwing cards that explode is really cool," Naruto smiled. "Make a switch." Gambit throws a number of cards at Wanda with a wave of his arm, and Naruto tries to stop him, but Colossus blocks his way. Wanda uses her magic to destroy 3 of the cards, but a 4th one lands in front of her and explodes, and she screams as she takes off running. "My foot." Naruto kicks Colossus in the chest. Naruto quickly realizes that power and his weapons will not be effective against Colossus, and he smiles as he grabs Colossus's arm and puts his foot behind Colossus's legs, causing him to fall backwards and limp a little. "Never really had to use jujitsu to defeat an opponent, but seems I have no choice," declared Naruto as he jumped backwards, limping a little. Wanda is falling back, struggling to keep up with Gambit, who is much faster than Colossus and can attack from a distance thanks to his mutant abilities. "I got you, girl." As Pyro approaches Naruto and Wanda from behind, a broad grin spreads across his face as fire transforms into a huge lion, which swoops down and lunges towards Wanda. Colossus looks surprised because Naruto is so strong. Naruto moves behind Colossus, grabbing the metal powerhouse by the shirt, and throws him at an unwary Gambit. The two of them collide. Naruto then blurs back into view in front of Wanda, pulling a scroll out of his pouch and opening it. The scroll is so big that it takes up some room, and a seal with the kanji for fire in the center covers the entire inside. "Fire sealing technique." Naruto smiles while holding his palm against the seal, causing the fire to be sucked straight into the seal. Pyro's eyes narrow in rage as he creates more fire, and the fire is sucked into the scroll until Pyro runs out of juice. Pyro's smile, like a cat that caught the canary, is short-lived. "What?" The tank on Pyro's back is entirely empty, and he runs out of sparks as he attempts to start more flames. "My turn." Pyro is struck in the jaw by Naruto's right hook, which causes him to fall hard to the ground. Wanda looks at Naruto with admiration, and Naruto senses it. He shoots towards her, grabs her bridal style, and continues to run as the metal floor beneath them begins to change to the motion of water in a wave. "Hang on tight." Naruto jumps up to the ceiling as the floor suddenly opens up into a wide hole, and Wanda puts her arms around his neck tightly as he runs across the ceiling. Naruto smiles as he channels his chakra to his feet and is riding the waves as he continues to run. Naruto and Wanda land in the room as Magneto stands composedly. "Father, I will finally have my revenge." Wanda grinned as she rushed forward, Encircling her entire body with blue magic, she thrust her hands forward, and Magneto was knocked to his knees by the magic. No. Naruto brings his hands together in a ram seal. Release. Wanda is shocked as the Magneto in front of her fades into the wind as chakra explodes from Naruto's body. Naruto looks at Mastermind and says, "Telepath." Magneto floats down from above. "I see you have learned to detect mental attacks." Mastermind gulped, "Impressive." "Buckethead," said Naruto. "Father," scowled Wanda. "Wanda, I know you may not want to believe it, but leaving you at that clinic is one of the hardest choices I had to make," Magneto says, taking off his helmet to meet Wanda's eyes. "I did it to benefit you." Wanda clenches her fists in rage, saying, "A monster cannot be heard. You have my undying forgiveness for what you did. I had hoped that we could begin again. Unfortunately, your pursuit of me has turned into a liability." Magneto replaces his helmet on his head, and Mastermind's eyes light up. Naruto stiffens as the world around him starts to spin, and he feels dizzy. The world is becoming a blur. Wanda raises her hands as steel beams fly at her, but a burst of magic catches them and sends them back at Magneto, who easily sends them back at Wanda twice as fast. She rolls out of the way and then shoots a stream of blue magic at Magneto, which hits the air. Magneto flies higher in the air, raising his hand, and the metal floor rises up, encircling Wanda. "Mastermind, have you dealt?" Standing over an unconscious Mastermind, Naruto smiles and says, "Those mental shields Jean helped me create sure did help big time." Magneto turns to Naruto and says, "Xavier is wasting your abilities. Become one of my acolytes and change the world for the better." "I don't defend other people." Naruto swings his arms, throwing 6 shuriken at Magneto, who raises his arm in surprise and pain as the shuriken continue to cut him across his arms and legs. "Hee. I made wooden shuriken and kunai," he says. "I fight for what I believe in." Naruto smiled while spinning a wooden kunai, saying, "I didn't like how you kept using my weapons against me." Magneto lifted his arms and said, "I can no longer stand your mockery any longer." "Oh." A scream fills the air. Magic burst from Wanda, destroying the metal that binds her. Wanda raises her arms. A blue beam of magic burst from her hands towards Magneto. Magneto is unable to dodge in time and the blue magic engulfs him, dropping him to his knees. "Wanda, don't do this." Magneto tries to use his powers, but he is unable to connect with them. "No more fleeing." Wanda glares angrily. "No more hiding. I'll get my retribution." "Death him." Naruto comes up beside Wanda. Wanda glances at Naruto. "Go on. For what reason are you waiting? It will be very simple. I mean, he has no power." "Yes, I will." Naruto turns to her and says, "Then do it," saying, "Go on, kill him because he upset you. After that, go find Pietro and murder him as well because he never stood by your father's side and never supported you. You can then eliminate your father's existence by killing Magneto's acolytes. After completing that, you can track down and murder anyone else who has enraged you." Naruto approaches her and says, "Go on, Wanda, become your father." Wanda's eyes enlarge as she looks down at Magneto. A monster who doesn't care about anyone else. He uses people to get what he wants and runs over anyone who gets in his way. He doesn't care about the harm he causes to people, including his own daughter. She breaks down in tears and drops to her knees. The magic binding vanishes, and the master of magnetism is knocked unconscious by a kick to the side of the head. Naruto puts a hand on Wanda's shoulder, and the two vanish in a cloud of smoke. At night, Wanda sits on the edge of a hill with her feet hanging over the sides, gazing up at the night sky, which is full of stars and a lovely full moon. Naruto sits next to her, silent, and they have been sitting in a comfortable silence for the past 3 hours. "Am I truly fond of him?" Wanda muttered. She looks at him disbelievingly and says, "No." Naruto smiles and says, "Magneto would not have shown an enemy the same mercy you showed him. He lacks your heart's capacity for compassion." "All that nonsense he says about wanting to help free mutants and the superiority of mutants for all of us. It is only making things worse." "I concur that war is imminent, but he is only interested in achieving his personal objectives." "I desired to do it with guilt in her eyes," Wanda said. "I think I would have killed him if you hadn't stopped me. To kill my own father, I really would have been no better than him." Naruto smiled and said, "I don't think you would have done it. You were strong, but I don't really know you that well. You managed to maintain your sanity despite spending years in a cage like a monster. I would have lost my mind." Wanda smiles pretty. "It's odd. I don't feel so angry anymore." She says, "I felt that way when I was with Professor Xavier." Wanda relaxes. For the first time in a long time, she didn't even consider that jerk of a father. He always used to find a way to calm me down. "Well, you can always come to the institute," Naruto said with a smile. "It's quite enjoyable." Additionally, he winks, and Wanda blushes slightly. "I can pull a few strings and get you your own room." "I don't know," Wanda said, averting her gaze. Following day, afternoon. When Professor Xavier steps out onto the front balcony, He sees Jean sitting on the porch, looking much calmer. She had been quite nervous yesterday after Naruto had vanished on his own, and it had been kind of funny until Kurt made a stupid remark about Naruto going out with Wanda. Jean didn't think it was funny, and she showed it by throwing Kurt out a window using her powers. Jean grinned and said, "He's back," Kushina says. "It looks like he brought a friend," as she stands beside Charles outside. Walking up the path with Naruto is Wanda, who is carrying a small brown bag on her back and is dressed in tight black pants, a sleeveless spaghetti strap top that reveals cleavage and a flat stomach, and black spiked bracelets on each wrist. "Jean." "Mom, old man." Naruto waves. The smirking Kushina said, "It's past curfew, Naruto." Jean grinned. "Hello, Wanda," said Professor Xavier with a smile. "I'm happy to see that you've improved significantly." As Naruto puts a hand on her shoulder, Wanda shifts uneasily and says, "Thanks," blushing slightly but resolutely. "I never really did thank you for all the times you tried to help me, thank you." "Yes, you are very welcome. I'm sorry. I should have shown you more trust and taken you to the institute sooner," Xavier said. Professor Xavier looks surprised as Wanda nervously rubs her arm and says, "If it is okay, I would like to come here. I would like to continue our sessions. I already came up with a really cool name." Naruto smiled. "The Witch in Scarlet." Wanda smiled softly as Professor Xavier said, "It would be an honor to have you here." Naruto cheered, causing the girl to flush, and Jean and Kushina grinned in recognition of Naruto's accomplishment.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.